I have been doing web development on my channel for a very long time now, and I'll be honest, I have never done mobile development because it just feels kind of intimidating to me. I didn't want to have to go and learn like yet another thing just so I can code on my device. But luckily, the Expo team reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do a sponsored video? I think this is actually their first sponsored video they've ever done, is what they said. At first, I was kind of hesitant because I'm like, I don't want to have to learn all this new stuff. But then I started using it, and I started spending the past couple of weeks. I haven't really been posting much on my channel because I have been trying to learn how to build out an application using Expo. And so that is what I'm going to show you in this tutorial today. It's a long video, but I have been building out a little social media platform using Expo. I've been learning about all the different tooling and how to get this stuff deployed out on their EAS service, which I'll talk about. Let me first start with walking you through what we're going to build out in this tutorial, and then we can just start setting up a new project and just code along with building this out. So right here we have the home page or the splash screen of my application where you can sign in if you already have an account, and you can sign up. This is using JWT authentication, and we're using Drizzle for the ORM that's connecting to our Postgres database for all the data. I'll just go ahead and make a user. I'll just say like user@example.com, and we can just go ahead and type in a password. And after you sign up, that's going to redirect you to the main feed where you can see all of the posts for all the users in the application. I can go ahead and post something new here. So I'll just say like, hello and welcome to Get Social. I'll go ahead and post this, and you will see that post show up over here. But this user doesn't have a default avatar, so I can go to my settings. And I can first of all just change my display name. So I can say, what is up? We can go ahead and save that. And then also we can change our profile picture, which is going to use a built-in file selector. Again, we're using the iPhone simulator where it's going to connect to the photos on the device. Let's just go ahead and select this waterfall. You can edit this built in directly with the Expo components, and I'll click choose. And that's going to update my image. That actually gets uploaded to a local S3 bucket, which is where all the user images are displayed. And if I go back, you'll see that that gets updated on the main dashboard. Now, some other stuff we can do is I can click on WebDev Cody, and I can just go ahead and follow this account. So now that I have followed WebDev Cody, anything he posts will actually send a notification to this account. Also, since I followed him, it's going to send a notification to him. And if I were to go ahead and just post something else like testing 1 2 3 and post that, he will get a notification that I just posted something. Now, since this is a brand new account, I don't follow anyone, so I don't get any notifications. So let's log out and log back in as WebDev Cody. So I'll say webdevcody@gmail.com. Go ahead and sign in. And then if I go to my notifications, you'll see that we have what is up followed us, which is nice. I can click this and go to the what's up profile. And if I want to go back to my feed, I can check that out. And then also I'm just going to post something as well. Say like testing 4 3 2 1. And then if I go back to that other account, so let's sign out and go back. Let's go to user@example.com. You'll see that I get a notification that WebDev Cody posted testing 4 3 2 1, and then I can go and check out his profile and see all the things he has posted. So that is overall what we're building. It's not too big of an application, but it's enough to get your hands dirty and feet wet building out an Expo application. And like I said, I've never built a mobile application before. Expo makes it super easy. And let me kind of show you some of the great things about Expo before I dive into the code. The first thing is when you actually start your Expo app, so if I do a bun start, it's going to print out some really cool stuff to your terminal. The first one is a QR code that you can scan with your phone. And if you have the Expo Go iPhone application installed, you can actually test on your physical phone, right? And I'm not going to do that in this video. We're going to be using the simulator for most and all of our development. But that's just one thing you can do. Also, if you want to host this and bring it up in a web browser, you can simply just press W here, and that is going to load up your Expo app in a locally running browser, like in Chrome. And I can actually log in and do all my other stuff that I would do in the mobile app. Now in this, I'm going to be using which brings up the iOS simulator. But if you're trying to do Android development, you can press A and open up that simulator as well. I won't be doing any Android development in this video, but I just want to give you a highlight of some of the really great tooling that is built in the Expo, which when I first started using this, I was actually kind of blown away with how nice the developer experience is. Which leads me to another great developer experience of Expo is you can actually have API routes built in directly to your application. So for example, when we want to create and get the profiles, all you have to do is make a profile plus this API suffix over here. And that's going to tell Expo that this is going to be a REST API route. So you can actually have like GET requests. You can do put request, delete, put, patch, all the CRUD operations you might need. And then you can get that request object and do your normal server API stuff in these Expo API. And we are going to be using these API endpoints all throughout our application to talk to Postgres to store and retrieve our data. Now, the very last thing I want to point out before we jump into the code is that you can use something called EAS to build and deploy out your Expo application to the cloud, right? So I can just do an EAS deploy here, and that's going to deploy my entire application to their EAS services, and I can actually load that up with my web browser and actually use my application. Okay, so after running that, we can get a link here, and I can click this and open it up, and you will see that we have our Git social application running on a hosted environment, which is actually pretty awesome. And then you can dive in to your project and you can get analytics about your hosted application. You can view logs and metrics and requests. There's just a lot that goes into the Expo ecosystem, and I'm probably only going to touch the surface in this video. I just want to get you guys familiar because a lot of this stuff is actually super easy and convenient to build out a mobile application. All right, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into coding out this application. And I hope you guys enjoy following along and learning a little bit more about mobile development using Expo. Let's start this project off by making a new repo. So over here, there's a new button. I can click on that on my GitHub account, and we're going to call this Git Social. I can't think of a better name for the social media application, but we're going to go ahead and do that. An MIT license and make it public. So after I create the repository, I should be able to click on this code button, and I'm going to go ahead and clone it down to my local workspace. So I'll click on this, and then if I go over to my code editor, let's just go to my workspace. I'm going to say git clone, and let's just go ahead and clone that repo so we can open it up. So now that we're good, we should be able to open this up, and then I'm going to find the Git social folder, and we should be good to start coding on our Expo app. So when you're starting off a brand new Expo application, you could go here to the README and they tell you can do an npx create expo latest. There is another approach that I'm going to be doing in this tutorial. There is a separate package here that has a bunch of pre-built components. It has like a skeleton loader. It has themed text areas, themed views. So I'm going to start with this one. It's called Expo Router Forms Component by Evan Bacon. So for example, it has like all these different components that are really nice looking. And if you scroll down, they give you examples of how you can use all these different components in your application. And so it's just a really nice starting point. It just gives you a little bit more than the original Expo starting point. So let's just go ahead and click on this bun x create expo -t. You may have to have bun installed to run this, but let's just go ahead and run this right here. And we should be able to hopefully just do it in our current working directory. So let's just run this command. And now we have a Expo project set up with all those components and a very simple layout with the Expo router, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So right here in the UI folder, we have all these different components, which we are going to try to use. So, all right, so now that we're ready to run this, I'm going to go ahead and just say bun start, and that is going to run the Expo CLI tool, which is actually really powerful. Like you'll see that it has a bunch of different options you can run to visualize the Expo app running. So for example, if I want to run this in a web browser, you can press W. So let's try that out. I want you to see that you can actually use Expo to build out web applications. So I press W, it'll load up a tab in your browser, and we should see the application load up here in just a few seconds. All right, here it is. Okay, so here is the example application. He basically has all these different components that you can play around with and kind of visualize. He has an account that opens up in a nice little, I guess it's like a modal. There are also like a home tab and an info tab. So I think this is a really good starting point where we can come in and just like delete the stuff we don't need and just build upon the scaffolding that is provided to us. Okay, so that's just to verify that it worked in the web browser. But in this tutorial, I will be doing most, if not all, the development in a simulator, which is probably how I would recommend that you try to build out your Expo app. If you want it to run on a phone, you should probably use a simulator to verify it. So if you look up here, there is a press I to open up the simulator. So let's just go ahead and press I, and I do want to tell you that in order for this to work, you do have to have Xcode installed on your machine. But once you have Xcode installed, you can go up to the top and you can go to Settings. And in Settings, there should be a platform that you can go to, and you have to install the iOS one, right? If you want to simulate your iPhone running on your machine, you have to install this, and it requires 7 GB of disk. So I believe after you have this installed, what you can do is if you go back to your terminal over here, you can actually do a Shift I. So hold down Shift and press I. And that's going to ask you which simulator you want to use. So in our case, we'll do iPhone 15, but you can actually change it to other generations of the iPhone if you want to test on different things. iPhone 15 is probably good enough. So let's just go ahead and select it. And that is going to load up a simulator with the application running, which is super cool. Now, the way I like to do development with this is I'm going to go ahead and full screen this, and then I'm going to put it right next to my code editor so I can see what I'm doing at the same time as I'm coding. Now, unfortunately, this is kind of different from my normal coding paradigm, so I'm going to move my face. I'm going to put it down to the bottom left of the screen. All right, so now we have the app running, and we can actually kind of click and scroll through the application. We can click on some things. We can go back. We have some built-in awesome account panels that we can use. We can click over here to switch to a different tab. And this is how we're going to be doing development for the majority of this video. So get used to using the simulator. And one trick I want to show you is if you press R, it's going to refresh and reload your entire application. Sometimes you have to force refresh your app. So you can do that here, or you can actually click on your terminal and press R as well. And that will do a refresh. And of course, you can just interact with this phone just like a normal phone. Now, this is using something called Expo Go, which you can download on your phone. And if you wanted to scan this QR code, let me scroll up a little bit. When you first start your Expo application, you'll see that there's a QR code here. If you scan this with your iPhone and you have Expo Go installed, so like go to your app store, install Expo Go, and then open up Expo Go, and you should be able to scan this QR code. And that's going to download your application that you have, your mobile application that you've been working on, and you can actually play around with that on your phone itself. Maybe I'll show that later, but I don't think it's important to know about that at this point. So we're going to keep on using the simulator. I'm going to press I, and we should be good to start coding with this thing. So let's do a quick overview of how this Expo application project structure kind of looks like. So we have this app directory, and in Expo, it has something called an Expo router, right? And so you can define different files. So for example, kind of similar to Next.js or TanStack router, where they have their own like routing system that's based on files. Expo router is kind of similar, where we have a folder here called parentheses index-info. This is like a grouping. So it's basically if you want to group every route or like your tabs that have a similar layout, you can do something like this. And then inside of here, we have some layouts, and then we have the actual paths that we can navigate to view the account page or view the index or view an info tab, etc. You see down here, we have an info file. Down at the right, we have an info tab. Let me hide my face for 2 seconds. We're going to actually delete a lot of this code and start with a more minimal starting point, but I just wanted to show you that we have this file-based router that we're going to be utilizing. And inside of here, you have all your images, like your assets. If you click on one of these, you have the loading image. You have like different logos and stuff. So if you want to load an image and show it in your Expo app, you'd probably put it here. We have all those components that we talked about that came from that initial scaffolding GitHub project. Some of the ones we're probably going to be using the most are like the skeleton. So if you want to have a skeleton loader when your page is initializing, we got some tabs over here. We have a theme provider where you can do dark mode and light mode. And let me kind of show you that. If you do a Command-Shift-A over here, it'll switch the entire thing to light mode. And so you can kind of develop with both light mode and dark mode and verify your app looks good depending on the user system settings. We'll probably touch on some of these as we continue to build out our application. Then finally, we have a hooks folder, which you can use for some shared hooks within your application. All right, let's start diving into some of this code and just simplifying it so we can start building out the application that we want to build. So this plus symbol, the HTML, this is like the root of your entire Expo app. So like you'll see here, it's loading in, HTML and head information, and then it's going to render out some children to the body. So this is very similar to like your root directory in like Next.js or in TanStack Start, where it's going to take all of your nested components here, like your routes, and it's going to inject the components inside your body as you change the routes that you're on. Now the plus symbol just means it's like a special file. So you'll typically use this for the HTML file or like the not found file. Next, let's look at the top level layout. And then in this layout is where we define the tabs for this particular layout. So we have like a home and an info tab. And these point to other routes. For example, we have this index that's in this grouping. This screen is going to point to index. It's going to have this type of system image of house fill, which is what's displaying down here. And then we have a title of home. So for example, if I just change the title and save, let me just do a hard refresh. You should see that the exclamation marks show up down here. And again, this right here, the parentheses, is basically telling it that it's going to load in this index file over here. So this is our home route that has a bunch of stuff that we're going to get rid of here in a second. But I wanted to point it out that we also have an info file that's going to point to this info.tsx. And you will get a better understanding of this as we build more out. So the first thing I want to start with is creating a login screen. So when this app first loads, if you're not logged in, I want to show a login screen with like a username and password and a register. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make a new group called auth. And that's just to be able to group my different auth related pages in the same folder because I want to have a similar layout with them. Okay. And I'm actually going to make a new folder called dashboard. And I'm going to move this layout and this grouping inside a dashboard. Okay. I just want to have the home page instead use a different layout. So I'm going to copy this layout code and we're not going to touch the dashboard just yet, but I am going to make another layout file here. I'm going to paste this in, and instead of having this have tabs, I'm just going to go ahead and bring in a slot. Okay. So a slot is again how you can kind of take a route, a component of a child route, and just slot it into a particular location like this. And then I'll make sure I import this from Expo router. And now if we were to, for example, go to auth and I made an index page here, we can go ahead and just start creating one. So I'm going to say export default function page. So on this page, let's just return a view for right now. So I'll say view, and then in here we'll say text. And then we can actually inside the text just put some hello. Make sure you import text from this UI components over here. All right, and so now it's loading up a blank page, which isn't that great, but you can see the hello text is showing up on the top left. So we just basically need to add a layout inside of every auth related route so we can have a wrapper for like where the inputs will be and how the form will look like. So I'm gonna go ahead and make one more layout like this. I'll say export default function layout. You can name this whatever you want, but I'll just name it layout. And then inside of this, we're going to make a stack, which is another component that we're going to import from that component folder. And then we can make a screen. So I'm going to say stack.screen. And then we want to give it a name, and I'll say index. Just like this. Now, I didn't really explain what a stack is. Basically, inside of a stack, you can have different screens. And so if you click on a button, if you don't want the entire thing to just reroute to another page, you can have something slide in, like a modal or a card. And then you can actually like specify some additional configuration options for the stack. So like you can actually give a header on this, and you can give it a title. And I think when you're on this page, that stuff will show up, right? So now you have a sign-in title that shows up on whatever page that you're on. And again, we will understand this a little bit better as we start building out, but we're going to keep it simple. And if you actually don't put any options, it's just going to show the name as default. So what I could do is actually add back that options, and I'll say header shown a false. We don't want the header to show on our page. So let's go back to the index. Now let's try to make like a landing splash screen. So like it'll show like the name of our application. So instead of saying hello, we'll call it like get social. That could be like our little like marketing thing. And then we want to figure out a way to like get this centered on the page. How do we do that? Well, it turns out there's a way to apply styles to these different React Native components. So down here, I can actually make a styles. So I'll say styles equals stylesheet.create. And this is similar to like CSS and JS if you code around with React much, where you can define your styles here as a component. Make sure you auto import that, okay? And basically you can style your page using these styles here. And what we do is we can go over here and just say style is equal to styles.container. And that's going to bring in that text to the center of the screen. Now, the way you can do the stylings is very similar to just CSS. You can just say justify contents. You can give it a flex of 1. You can give it a line item center, and that's going to put it vertically and horizontally centered on the page. You can give it padding. And then we can also style the text. So like here, we could say like, I don't know, title. And then we can just give that some larger font and make it bold. So now I could say style is title. It looks like this. So now that we have like a splash screen for this application, we can actually add a button. So in React Native, you can import this button. You can give it a title, and I'll say sign in. And I'm going to go ahead and just close off this button for right now. But then you can also add a sign up button like this. So now we have a sign in button and a sign up button. I want to kind of walk you through how we could use these buttons to actually navigate to other screens. All right, so for the sign in button, when I press this thing, I want to navigate the user and show them the sign in page, right? So what I'm going to do first of all is we can make a new route here. I'll say sign in, just like this. And we're going to copy this page We'll say sign in, and we'll remove these buttons for right now. And we'll keep the container and yeah, it should be good. And then also we'll make a sign up page. So let's go here and say sign up. This will be almost identical to the other page. Okay, so now going back to our main index. How do we make it so when you press on these buttons, it'll navigate the user to sign in or sign up? Turns out in Expo, there is a router that you can bring in. So I say const router is equal to use router, like this. Make sure that gets imported from Expo router. And then here, you can simply say on press, which is a function or a property that you can pass to button. And then I'm going to go ahead and just invoke those like this whenever you click on the button. So let's test this out over here. If I click on sign in, you'll see that it gets an unmatched route. I think I might need to just do R and just hard refresh it. And then everything works good. So now I can actually click sign in and sign up, and it takes me to those pages. Okay, so now here comes a really cool part. With Expo, if you go back to the layout, we have these different stacks. And if you don't put them as screens inside your stack, they just default to like going to another page, and then you have like this default back button. But if you wanted to customize these and have them like show up as a modal or something else, you can actually add them to this layout. So I'm going to add in the sign in, make sure the name matches sign in over here. And I'm also going to add in sign up like this. And first of all, we're going to get rid of the headers so that we can customize it the way we want it to be. But something that's really cool is you can go here and give this a presentation, and I can say modal. And now when I click it, it shows up as a modal. There's also a card. So if I do card like this and click it, you'll see that it kind of slides over from the opposite direction. So depending on the needs of your application and where you want things to slide in, you can change the presentation. You can also change the orientation, I believe. So I think you could say like orientation, and you could do, you know, landscape right if you wanted to. So let's try that again. And it kind of rotates the whole thing. That's probably not what we want here. Now for this page, we actually do want the sign in title so that we can actually like have a user navigate backwards. So we'll add that. But for the actual title, I want to go ahead and just say sign in. And then we are going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to go ahead and just show the header. But we're going to go ahead and say presentation is a card, which will allow us to go to it. Now you may ask, like, why do we have to do this if it defaults to this? Again, it's because the title does not default. Like, it's just going to say sign-up, and you can't really customize it. So like we have to make sure we add those stack screens so that we can change how the titles will look up here. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Like we understand how to make different pages, and you can click on stuff to navigate to the new pages, and you get this nice screen animation that happens for you automatically. So this is looking pretty good, but I don't like the styling of the sign in and the sign up buttons. So we could probably style these. Now, in order to style these, you actually need to change these to be pressables. So I'm going to change these and bring in a pressable. And inside the pressable itself, we can just go ahead and add some text. Okay, so we're kind of making like a custom button, and that's going to show sign in. But the reason we're doing this is so that we can actually style the text in the pressable itself. So on the pressable, I'm going to go ahead and just down here, I'll say sign in button. And then we're going to attach that style to here. So let's just add that in. And then we're going to also, for the sign out button, we will do the same thing over here. So we have a sign in and a sign up button. We could make this one gray, and sign in, we could just keep it blue. But then also, I think giving this more gap, like 24. I think also just making these a little bit bigger, so like 120 pixels. And then on the sign up button, again, we'll give this a width of 120. Now, in order to actually make the text of these buttons be larger, you have to attach it to the text itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just say like style is styles.button text. And we can just go ahead and add it to both. And then down here, we can just add in the button text. And we can change how this kind of looks. We can make it bold. We can make the font size a little larger, like a 24. And then we should be also able to center this in the button itself. And on the button, maybe a padding of, let's try 24, and I'm actually going to get rid of the width. Okay. All right, so at this point, we have learned quite a lot from Expo Router in the short amount of time. We learned how to make buttons. We learned how to make new routes. We learned how to style different buttons by making them pressable and actually putting text inside them. And we learned how to customize the title of these pages as we click on them. Now, last thing is let's add a nice little like placeholder image of something. All right, I went ahead and just typed in a prompt, 3D cartoon astronaut speaking into a microphone on a moon, glowing starlights, inspiring. Out of these, I think this one looks pretty cool. We're going to go and put that in our assets folder inside of images. We're going to paste that in, and I'll just call this splash.jpg. Okay, so now that the image is in our assets folder, we can actually just go here and say image, and then we're going to just say source is equal to, and then we can say require, and then we want to just import that assets images splash.jpg, and then we can give it a style, I think. Go ahead and save that. Yeah, it seems like it's working. So basically, this is how you could do it. And then down here, we applied a style to it. So like here we have the logo. You want to make it a little bit bigger, like 240. This could be 200. You can make it rounded, border radius of 10. Something like this. And I could say, instead of time to get social, say let's get social. I'm not gonna lie, those sign-in buttons look pretty bad, so I might reduce the padding a little bit. The button font size, I think it's just too big. And then the blue color is just like, just way too blue. Make a nice looking lighter blue. I'm not sure what a good background color would be. I think I'm gonna use AI real quick. I'm gonna say, give me a good color background hex that I could use to make this look nice. All right, let's go with this deep space blue. Let's see what that gives us. Yeah, it's not too bad. We could probably spend, hours tweaking this and make it look nice, but we just want to have a nice starting point, and I think we found a good starting point. So we learned how to load in assets. Again, you just put them in this assets directory, and then you could just import them directly using a require statement and point it to the path of your JPEG or your PNG. And now if you click on sign in, it should take you over there. If you click on sign up, it should take you over there. And you can change the styling of these pages as needed. Like if you don't want them to be dark black, you could go ahead and just change that over here. And we could go to sign in. Just go ahead and give that a nice color like this. And then sign up, we could also do it. I might just play around with this color until it looks a little bit different. Like sign up could be a little bit different. Sign in could also be a little bit different, just so it gives it like this cool effect that we're loading in a new screen. Anyway, we've made some good progress. Let me go ahead and just commit what we have. And I'm going to go ahead and just say add all. And I'll say working on the initial splash screen. And just go ahead and commit all that. All right, let's move on to filling out the sign up page. So let's click on this and we can actually start building out a form. So we don't want it to say sign up here. All we really need it to do is probably just have like a text input and a label. So we'll say text and it'll say sign up. And then we'll have a input. I think it's called text input like this. And you can import this from React Native. And we can just go ahead and import this one and make sure that it shows something. Okay, so now we have a sign up with a field that we can select. Again, we should probably style these. So let's go ahead and say this could be an input. And then this could be styles of this. And then we'll just go ahead and say make a generic iPhone input style. I'm not going to waste too much time on like trying to get the styling looking good. Just get something decent. And then over here, we'll do a label like this, and we can just go ahead and apply that label text to this. Can we say text align left? And then we're going to go ahead and just do a wrapper here. So I'm going to say view style is a form, or I'll say a field. Let's just do something like this. And then down here we can say field is going to be a width of 80%. And that should probably be good. So now I can get rid of this 80% on these two things. Cool. And then this should say email, not sign up. So I have email. We'll add another one for the password. Like that. And then we want to add some gap between all this stuff. So I'm going to say gap of, actually I'm going to make a form here. I'm going to say view style is a form. Go ahead and wrap this in a view. And then down here I could say form is going to be equal to gap of 12 right now and see how that looks. maybe 24. We could say width of 100% or 80%. Yeah, let me change that to 80%. Here we go. Like we could probably make this into our own button. Like I'm just gonna say app button.tsx, and we'll say export function app button, and then we will just go ahead and return the pressable like we did over here. So we'll just go ahead and like import this pressable. Okay, we'll go ahead and just paste that in, and then we'll say const styles is equal to this. Go ahead and import the style sheet. We want to go ahead and find the sign in button because I think this could be a nice reusable type of style that we use everywhere. And then we will just add it here. And then we will add that style to this. We'll import some stuff. I'll just say text up here. Okay. And then this could be button text. So let's go and add the button text. Again, what am I doing? I'm just trying to abstract away the button so we can reuse it on different pages. And this also allows us to quickly add like stylings and stuff. So now we could add like an on press. I'll say children, and we'll say on press. And then we'll just go ahead and like let AI autofill those things. And we just simply say on press when this thing is invoked. And then we'll pass in children for the text here. Again, this is just a normal like React component. But now what we could do is we can use that sign in button here. Like I say, app button, import that, and then make sure you import the sign in and the sign up. And we should be able to hopefully like do this on the home page so that we have like a shared button on both. But what we'll probably need to do is figure out a way to pass in some styles. So if we want to do like some custom styles, we could probably pass that in. Up here, I'll say style. And then we could just go ahead and say style prop. This is coming from React Native. So like we could actually pass in some more style props and have those be applied. If you do an array like this, you can actually like combine styles together. The reason we're doing that is because the default button has this like blue background. But for the sign up, we actually want like a different text color. So we'll just go ahead and do the style. And then down here, we really just want to do a background of gray. So I'll say like styles sign up button. Cool, and then some of the stuff we can delete now. Like I don't think we need the sign in button. We don't need the button text. And I think we did a good job cleaning this up. So now we have a button that we can customize. For example, if we go to the sign up page, we could then use that app button. Let me go to sign up page. Here it is. And then at the bottom, we'll say app button, and we'll just import that. And then once you've clicked on it, we should probably do something. Right now, I'll just do a console log like this. There. So now we can go to it, click sign up. And right now it doesn't do anything, but we could potentially look at the console logs that are showing up down here in our terminal. Okay, this is looking pretty good. So now when someone types in email and password, we probably want to make these fields be required. Okay, so when someone presses sign up, we want to run some validation logic over these texts and make sure that they're actually like defined. Because I don't think we can do, over the text input, I don't think we can say required. So we have to manually kind of bind some state to this. So I'm gonna go ahead and say up here, say const email and password. Okay, and I'll say function handle sign up. And then we want to basically verify email and password are defined and are valid emails and 8-character length passwords. I don't know if this is the best regex for verifying this stuff, but now what we could do is when someone presses this app button, we can invoke handle sign up. Okay, so now we have a way to handle the sign up, but what we also want to do is we want to bind these text inputs. So we can say value is equal to email. Over here, we can say value is equal to password. And then actually, I don't think there's any placeholders on here, so we don't even need placeholder. Let's get rid of those. Okay. And then also when someone changes something, so I think you can say on change, we could probably just set the email and see if that kind of works. We can also say here, we'll say on change text, and we'll call set password. Oh, and then down here we can say secure text entry. Save that so that we can't actually see the text that was typed out. I'm also going to add auto capitalize to none on these text fields because it keeps like making the first thing we type in be capitalized. That's probably not a good approach. It'll probably mess up their passwords. Okay, so I think we're good in terms of the inputs. I'm going to see what happens if I delete these and like try to use the alert. Okay, please fill in all fields. So I'll type in like this. Please fill in all fields. Please enter a valid email address. Be like webdevcody@gmail.com, and over here could just be like some randomly secure password, right? Okay, so now we have some basic validation. Again, this is not the best. You should probably do like real input field validation and have like an alert pop up. But if you just want to rapidly prototype, which is what we're trying to do right here, we could just stick with this. And then after we validated the form, we can go ahead and try to submit this information somewhere. Okay, so this is where we can use something called an API that's built into Expo. So over in Expo, you can make a new folder called API. And then this API directory, we can make a route called sign up. And then we can say then we say plus API .tsx. So this plus API is like some additional keywords that tell Expo that like this is going to be an API endpoint that you can actually invoke, which is what we're going to be doing on our sign up page. So we'll say export function, and then we'll say post, and that's going to take in a request object like this, and we should be able to take in the email and the password from the request. So we'll get the JSON body, and we're just going to console log that out. And then we can go ahead and return a new response like this. In fact, I think I'd say response.json and just return back a message like this. Okay, so now we have a backend endpoint, which we can invoke at /API/sign-up. Okay, so that is going to use the file-based routing to map this post request where we can send some information to this backend, do some processing. Eventually, we'll probably have to create a user in the database, do some JWT authentication. But yeah, let's just try this out. And we're going to go up here and we want to invoke that backend endpoint. So I'm going to say fetch. We're going to invoke API sign up. We're going to go ahead and pass in the method of post in the body, which will be email and password. And then eventually, if this thing finishes, we can go ahead and just redirect them to like their dashboard, which we don't really have a dashboard page yet. So right now I'm going to say .then. And then we will just say alert, you signed up. All right, let's try this out. I think if I click on sign up, it should have called this method. It should have went to /sign up and tried to console log this, but I'm not seeing anything print out anywhere. So I'm going to do a hard refresh on the app just in case. It's not really working right now. Let's go to sign up, webdevcody@gmail.com. Type in a password. I'll click sign up. Yeah, for some reason it's still not doing anything. There must be an issue here. Again, like let's just add some console logs. We'll add a console log here. We'll add a console log here, and then we'll add one here. Save that, and let's try it again. So it's calling signing up. But the backend doesn't seem to be running, so we might have to actually modify something. Let's go to our app.json. I think there's something I forgot to do. So like if you find Expo router, what we could do is we could wrap this in array brackets, and then I'm going to say origin, and we can simply say HTTPS API routes Expo app. I believe you can just put whatever you want here. It just has to be defined, and eventually you're going to replace this with your real like domain name. But I think doing that allows us to restart our application, and we should be able to sign up now. Let's try this. Okay, there it seems like it's working. You have signed up, it did the alert. So again, you have to add this option inside of Expo router so it knows like where to potentially make the API request. And I think this is really only going to be used on production. But the fact that this is defined, it knows that fetch request should hit localhost 8001, like that's the default. All right, let me get rid of some of these console logs. I think we should be in a better position now. All right, so we're going to actually try to process that backend request by using a library called JSON Web Token. And we want to send back that token to the mobile app so that they can store that token and we can know if the user is authenticated for future requests. So I'm going to say bun add JSON Web Token, like this. That should add that in, and I could simply just say import JWT from JSON Web Token. And then once the email and password comes in, we want to basically do some authentication checks on these things. But then we want to create a user, and then we want to get the user information and go ahead and verify that. Okay, so once the user makes the request, I'll put some to-dos here. So I'll say validate email and password. Okay, you want to validate on your backend as well. Actually, I'm going to put a 1 there too. I'll say look up user by email in database. If user exists, get the user info, return an error. If not, create the user in the database, create the JWT token, and return the token. So that is the approach that we're going to take to be able to store this stuff. All right, so let's just allow AI to kind of help us move a little bit faster. So first of all, if there is no email or password, we'll return an error with the status code of 400. Also, if the password length is under 8, we'll return an error. Also, if the email doesn't have an @ symbol in it, we should probably just use a regex, but how do we do it here? Let's just do something like this. We want to make sure that it is a valid email. And there's validation libraries we could use. Again, I'm just trying to keep it simple. Instead of like pulling in all these different libraries every single time, we'll just use some code that's generated to let us move fast. All right, and then if everything's good, so we have an email, we have a password, and what we need to do next is we have to look up the email in the database. Now, right now, we don't even have a database. So we could try to add in a database, which might be a good next step. So what I would recommend doing is I'm going to use something called Drizzle, and we're going to run a Postgres database locally. So I'm going to say docker compose YAML so that I can spin up a Docker database locally. So you'll have to go install Docker. So you can go look up the instructions at Docker. It's like probably just like a brew install Docker if you have Mac. If you have Windows, it's probably something else. But we're going to paste in an existing Docker compose file that I have. I'm going to go ahead and just change the prefix just a little bit. So the get social DB. And what this allows us to do is inside another terminal, once we've created this Docker compose file, which I think is being hidden by my head. So let me go ahead and just hide my head real quick. There's a Docker compose file here. If we do a Docker compose up in this directory, that is going to pull in a Postgres Docker image, and then it's going to run it on this port on our machine with this name of the container. And then there's like a volume out here, which allows it to store information about the database on my computer. It looks like I already have a database running. I might have to go and like see what's running here. So we have, yeah, I have a database running on another app. Let me just close that down real quick. But you'll see here that it kind of pulled in all the database image from Docker Hub. So now that I stop both of those databases, I should be able to go back and run this Docker compose up command. Okay. Now, this is what it looks like if it's successful. You should have a bunch of logs, no errors, anything like that. And so now we should be able to bring in an ORM that I like using called Drizzle, which will allow us to connect to a database to store the user's information. So let's open a new terminal. I'll say bun add Drizzle ORM. I think we also want a Postgres driver. So I'll say Postgres like that. I think that should be good. Okay, so those are the two libraries we're going to need so that we can have our application on the backend side of things. Remember, this is an API that we're building, so it's all backend. We want this API to be able to connect to a database. So to achieve that, we're going to have to create a couple more files. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add a DB directory. I'll just go ahead and add one. I'm going to right click here. I know my face is hiding it, but I'm going to say new folder DB. And inside that DB directory, we want to make an index file. So I'm going to go here, I'll make an index.ts, and we're going to paste in this code here. So this is the bootstrap file for like initializing Drizzle with a Postgres connection. And it does need a database URL. So we're going to go ahead and add in a .env file. Go here, I'll say .env.sample. And then we want to add in a database URL so that it knows what database that we're trying to connect to. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and just paste in this one. And then we can also just copy and paste this. And I can say .env. Okay, and one of them is going to be just like an example so people can clone this project and know what to configure. The other one needs to be kind of hidden. So in the .getignore, let's add in that .env so it's no longer going to be committed to our code base. And then we're going to go ahead and have this here. So the reason we're doing this is because we want this to be able to find the database that's running locally on our machine, and then it should be able to connect to it. All right, so now we also need to add in another file called schema. So I'll go here, and we're going to go ahead and just make a new file called schema.ts. And this is where we're going to start defining a users table. So I can go ahead and just say export const users equals pg table. We'll say users. And then we're going to define some information about what's going to live on that table, such as an ID. And then we can have an email. We can have a password, a created at. We don't need an updated at, I don't think. And we're going to start importing some of these from PG Core. If you're using Postgres, you want to use PG Core. Let's do that one. And I think we could do this one as well. Let me auto-generate this ID here. Okay, so now when we create a new user, it should generate them a random UID ID. We should store the password and also the email. And we need to make sure that the email is unique so we don't have multiple people signing up with the exact same email. So we're going to go ahead and just add in those. And then going back to the index file, let's make sure that we can load in the schema file. Cannot find module schema. Okay, so I think we just need to probably restart TypeScript. So down here, I'm going to say Command-Shift-P, restart TypeScript server, and then that should hopefully find that now. Now, the last thing I think we need to do is I'm going to add in a file called Drizzle config. So it's hidden behind my head, but it's drizzleconfig.ts. And you should be able to also install something called Drizzle kit. So bun add Drizzle kit. Oh, sorry, bun add, not bug add. Okay, so that should install Drizzle kit. We should restart our TypeScript server one more time. We might need to also install .env. So bun add .env. Okay. And so what Drizzle kit is, it's a tool that you can use with Drizzle to basically run and apply your migration scripts across your database. And this is telling it, you know, what database URL to use, what location for your migration scripts should be, where's your schema file. So at this point, I think we should be good to try it. So we have this new table that we want to generate. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add one more thing in the package.json. Let's go to the package.json. And I like to add some commands that kind of wrap Drizzle kit. So I'm going to go ahead and add one called db generate. And that's going to call Drizzle kit generate. And then I like to do a db migrate, which is going to call Drizzle kit migrate. And then finally, I like to say db studio. Okay, so we have three commands that we can use now. So if I say bun run db generate, that is going to look over our schema file. It's going to determine what new tables it needs to add or modify, and then it generates some migration scripts. So over here, we should have some migration scripts. Okay, so 0000 worried the executioner. It just generates a random title for this, but you can see here it generates some SQL statements to create that users table. And it has an ID, an email, password, etc. So now that we've created the schema and we've created the migration script, we have to actually run the migration script. So I'm going to say db migrate, and that should take that migration script and it's going to apply it to that locally running Docker database that I talked about. And then finally, we can say bun run db studio, and that is going to allow us to connect to something called Drizzle kit. So I'm going to go here in a new tab, and we should see our database that has a users table now. Okay, so we can store the ID, the email, the password in the created app. I have a lot of videos about Drizzle on my channel, so hopefully you understand a little bit about how databases work, how migrations work, how you can set up Drizzle. But if not, I would go read through the docs or watch some other my tutorials if that was kind of confusing to you. But at this point, we should be good to go back to that API we created, and we have to look up the user by email. So I'm going to say const user, and the way we can use that database object we just created, I'm going to say await DB, and then I think we can go ahead and import that. Up here, I'm going to say import DB from that DB location, like this. This is complaining because we have to actually like install these types. So I'm going to go here and just make a new terminal, and I will say bun add. We'll add those types in, and then we're gonna restart TypeScript one more time. Okay. All right, it's a lot of stuff, I know, but we're gonna get there. So now that we have this DB object, we can actually say query dot users dot find first, and then we give it parentheses, and we can say where, and we want to find the first user that matches the email that we're trying to pass in. So if there is no user, we just go ahead and throw an error. Or sorry, if there is a user, we say no user already exists. And then we want to create a new user. So I can just go ahead and say const new users equal to await db.insert users, and we're going to pass it the email. And instead of passing the password here, we should be salting it and hashing it. I'll put to do here. I'll say salt hash password. But we'll come back to that. I just want to like verify this works. You should never store plain text passwords. Okay, just want to make sure you guys hear me say that, because I know I'm going to get comments about it. Don't store plain text passwords. You should salt and hash the passwords. But finally, if the new user was created, what we can do is we can just say const token, and we can do jwt.sign. We're going to go ahead and get the new user ID, which I think we need to say returning here. This command allows you to get the information that was just created when you did that database insert. So I think technically I could get the new user like this. This will be the new auto-generated UID for the user. And then we need a JWT secret, because the way JWT sign works is it uses a secret string to sign the user information so that we know that no one tampered with it. Okay, I'm not going to go into depth about how JWT works. We just need a token that we know is proper. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to here. We're going to say my secret JWT. I'm going to add that to my .env as well. And then finally, we could probably just return the token back. Okay, so if they have done all this, we can just return the token. Now what we could do is we could test this out. This is a lot of code, but let's test it out, because what we want to do is when the user actually signs up, so if we go back to the sign up page, after they sign up, we should get back a token, right? So this should actually have like a response. And I can say if the response is okay, we'll say const data is equal to responsive JSON. And then we can just go ahead and console log that data like this. And then eventually we probably want to store that data into local storage or something. I do believe there's a hook for storing in local storage. I saw something about local storage. Okay, there's a runtime component called local storage. Yeah, so I'm actually going to say local storage dot store item or set item token, and I'm going to pass that token there. And then finally, what we could do is probably do like a router push and go to a dashboard page like that. Now, in order to do a router push, we have to import the router. I'll just go ahead and do that, import the router. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on here, but hopefully you guys are following along. Let's just test this out real quick. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say webdevcody@gmail.com, and I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that should hopefully, if we did this right, if I click sign up, we should see it. It seems like it crashed. Why did it crash? Okay, that time it didn't crash. I just had to do like a hard refresh, I think. Yeah, I think this worked. Okay, so now if we go back to our database and just click on refresh here, we have a user. Again, never store the plain text password in your database. We'll come back and fix that in a second, but we have successfully created the user. I had to just manually stop this and restart it and restart my app. I haven't figured out Expo fully yet. Sometimes you have to just hard refresh it. Sometimes everything else just works perfectly fine. Yeah, let's just go ahead and commit this real quick since we made quite a lot of progress. I'm gonna go ahead and say adding in user table and database and ability to sign up. There's still a lot more that we have to cover in order to even get login working, but we'll get there. We're making some progress. All right, let's circle back and try to do the salt in the password hashing. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and say const hash password is equal to await to bcrypt. We'll probably have to install a bcrypt library, and I don't know if this will fully work because I think when this is deployed, it's going to use like Cloudflare workers or something. Let's actually just let AI try to do this. I'm going to say, can you please hash and salt the password using an approach that will work on Cloudflare workers. Okay, so let's try this out. Because honestly, I don't have this stuff memorized. Okay, so what this is doing, hopefully this will work, is we're bringing the Web Crypto API, and we're going to take in the password that the user sent, and we want to basically encode it. So we get a password buffer, and then we're going to hash it. This is going to give us a hash that we're going to convert to an array of, doing all this stuff to turn it into a string eventually. So it's going to be a string of the hash password. And we're not going to worry about the salt. At some point, you should come back into the salt. I want to move on to the actual fun part, which is like the functionality, not the authentication part. So now instead of storing the password, a plain text password, what we could do is we're going to delete this user, and I'm going to sign up one more time. And I'm going to click sign up here and go back and just refresh. And now it stores a random thing. Like this is just a giant hash of my original password, so that if someone were to breach your database and steal all your data, they don't know the passwords of all your users. And so they couldn't just like log into your passwords and start doing bad things. They'd actually have to know what the original password was, and they won't know that. There's also something called a salt we should be storing on every single record, and the hash should use the salt to generate it, so that there's ways to to increase the security. But I think that's good enough for right now. Now, the reason we did this is because you're going to need that whole hash thing when it comes to signing in. Okay, so for sign up, we should be good, I think. We don't have a dashboard page, so I think we should go back and add one. We go back to here. I think I can actually say dashboard index. I think that's the proper way I need to do it. But anyway, we're going to copy this whole page because we implemented a lot of good functionality for sign up. But now we're going to copy all this. I'm going to go to sign in, and I'm going to paste all this. Okay, so let's go back to sign in, and then I'm going to, hopefully it'll take us to the sign in page. There it is. Now for sign in, it's not loading, so let's just do a hard refresh. There it is. We have an email and a password. Instead of saying sign up, we want to say sign in. And this is going to change just a little bit. So again, we don't want to call sign up. We want to call sign in when we do the post request. And a lot of the logic is going to stay the same. Like we should probably make the password not check the length because that doesn't matter on sign in. It just needs to be filled in. Like just make sure you fill in the email and the password, and that should be good enough. And then finally, I think after you sign in, we could just go ahead and set the password equal to nothing and set the email equal to nothing. And now that I think about it, we should probably do that here as well. So after you successfully register, we should reset those things. Okay. So let's go and try to verify this works. So we're going to go ahead and call a sign in API endpoint, which we'll have to create. We don't have one, so let's copy and paste this whole thing. We'll call it sign in plus API. And again, this is going to take a post request. And the difference here is that we don't need to validate the inputs at all. Like we could just go ahead and look up the user based on the email that you passed in. And then we're going to take the password that they sent in. We're going to do the same type of hashing algorithm. Okay, so we're going to hash this. In fact, I could probably just take this whole code, and I'm going to go up here and just say export function hash password. We're going to paste that in and just return it, so that we don't have duplicate code. We want to use the exact same algorithm. So let's just go ahead and do this like that. Okay, and then we're going to go back to sign in. We can do this. I haven't tried importing files from other files in Expo, so hopefully it should work. So instead of creating a user, we want to say if the user.password, if it doesn't equal to the hash password we just generated, then we send back an error, okay? It's saying user is possibly undefined. Am I forgetting to do something here? Oh, this should say if there is no user. Okay, so if there's no user, then obviously you're trying to log in with someone who doesn't exist. User does not exist. Okay, so then we get the password that they passed in from the API request. We compare it to the database's password. And then finally, if everything's good, we're going to take that user that we got. We're going to sign that JWT with that JWT secret. And technically, this could also be like pulled out into a shared function. So I could say export async function sign or verify generate JWT. How about that? And we'll just go ahead and pass in a user object here. We'll say user ID could be a string like this. And then we'll return it. All right, so now we're doing this is because we want to just import this one. We'll pass in the user ID. I don't know if this needs to be awaited on. We're just going to await it anyway. And we can go back to the sign up API and we can do the same thing. So here we'll just do that. And that should be the new user ID. Okay. So again, just abstract code when you can, because you don't want the same like environment variable copied and pasted everywhere. We should also have an expires at, honestly. Like if you want to make this super secure, you should probably expire this JWT after like an hour or something. And then it comes into play of like the refresh token and the access token. I'm not going to dive down all that path. Like this isn't a course about authentication or security. This is just getting something simple set up so we can start signing in as a user. But at least you're getting a good idea of like how you can roll your own JWT authentication. Okay, so finally, let's go ahead and sign in. And if we have signed in successfully, we should be doing the same stuff and then finally redirect to the dashboard. So I'm going to say web dev Cody, and then I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sign in. And that should have worked. Let's see. Now, honestly, I don't know why this is failing. So what I might do is I think it's because I'm like importing stuff from other places. It might be a better idea to not do that. I think instead, if I made a new folder here called utils, and then I'll say like auth.ts, we can actually move both of these out. And I'll put it here and we'll just go ahead and make sure we have JWT pulled in like this. Okay, and so now instead of the sign in depending on the sign up route, it's probably better if it just depends on those functions from that utility. I don't know if that's actually the issue here, but hopefully it's what's causing the issue. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a hard stop here and just restart it. And then I might actually just close out of that, reload the emulator. Let's try it again. Okay, so it didn't crash, so I think it's good. I don't really have any console logs to know if it worked or not, and also it should have redirected us to the dashboard page, so I'm not sure why that didn't seem to do anything. I think the easiest thing going forward would be to delete these two files, and I'm going to make a new one called index.tsx, and then we're going to say export default function page. I'll make a view that just says dashboard in it. Okay, we'll keep this super simple. And then after you sign in, we just want to redirect the user to that dashboard page. I think I should be able to do this. Okay, I don't know why this isn't working. Let's just do an alert here and see. Okay, sometimes I actually find it easier to debug stuff in the web console. Right now it's failing because account layout doesn't exist. I don't know why it would be looking for those. I feel like there's just something that's like not working. Let me try restarting it one more time. Okay, now it's working. Let's try signing in this way. And again, like I said, like Expo has everything you do like works with the web. The styling might look a little bit different depending on the components you used, but let's just go ahead and try this one more time. Go ahead and click sign in, and it redirects us back to the dashboard. So this is working. I don't know why it wasn't working before. Sometimes you just got hard to refresh that stuff, you know? Try this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sign in. So it gets here. I added a console log. It gets the signing in. It should be doing a post request to sign in API. Are we getting a response back? We get a response back. Are we here? Okay, we get the response okay. We should get the JSON back. Let's just go ahead and console log the data. We get a token back. We should be doing router.push to go to the dashboard page, and then we should be setting the email and password. Okay, it must be this local storage thing. Let me just comment out the local storage for right now and just see if that fixes it. Okay, that works fine. Yeah, there's something going on with the local storage. I guess we'll deal with that later. I don't know what is broken about that. But eventually we're going to have to like take that token and store it somewhere. So I'm not sure why that was not working. Anyway, okay, so it works. We have this new dashboard page and we get redirected to it. Okay, so instead of local storage, I'm going to try out this Expo secure store, which I think it just gives you a secure way to store things like JWT tokens and stuff. This is a size limit value for 2048 bytes. Attempting to store larger values may fail. I don't know how many bytes our thing is. Hopefully it's not over that. But what we could do is install it. And then I think they show you how you could potentially use it. So it looks like you could probably use it down here. You just have to configure a couple things. Let's try it out. I'm going to say bun add. And we'll add that thing in. And then in our plugins, we want to add in secure store. So let's go to the app JSON. I guess you could just put it wherever you want. Put it right here. Figure Android backup. I don't know if we actually need this stuff, but we'll just keep moving on. Again, I haven't tried this before, so we're going to try this out live. So to use it, you can bring in a get value for and a save. Let's just bring this whole thing in. And then in our sign up and sign in pages, I think we should make a utility called like storage. And I'm going to paste this in and we could just simply export these so we can use them. And then we're going to allow us to store some keys and some values, okay? So let's go and let's call this save. Call this secure save. And then we'll say secure get. How about that? And now let's try this out. So when we sign in, we're going to get the data and I'm going to say secure save. I'm going to save the token and hopefully this will work. This Expo secure store cannot be found within the project. I might have to do a hard refresh on this thing. So let's rerun bun start. Go ahead and reopen the app. Okay, that's good. Let's sign in. Okay, let's click sign in. And it looks like it stored it somewhere. So I'll say update password, whatever. Now let's test to see if this works. So now on our dashboard, what we could do is I'm going to say const token, set token is equal to use state. And then I want to fetch the secure token when this component mounts. So we'll just do this. Let's make sure we import the use effect. And this thing could potentially be void. What does secure give us? It gives us potentially void. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let me just return result. That's kind of weird that has a statement there. All right, let's just return the result here. Yeah, maybe there's a way you should delete too. Okay, so let's try this out. We need to store the token, and then I just want to render it out somewhere, like just to verify this works. Click sign in, and there he is. There is a token. So that's probably a better way. I guess, I don't know if this local storage file does. Maybe there's a better way to use this local storage thing, but I think probably securing a JWT in a secure store is probably the better approach. So let's go back to the sign up, and we're going to do the same thing. Let's go to the sign up page, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to safely, securely store that token, and then we go to the dashboard page. Now you might ask, well, why are we doing this? What's the point of doing all this? Because when we go to our index, we could run a check to say if we're logged in, aka we have a token, we could just automatically redirect the user to a different location, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just add an effect in here, which we did here. I could probably pull this out into a hook, and I could say useAuth.ts, export function useAuth, and we're simply going to do that function call there. So we want to get some state, do a secure get on it, and then we can return that token like this. Technically, I can say is logged in and just check if the token is defined. You probably want to go a little bit further and say is a token expired, etc. But now we can use this useAuth in our front end, and I could simply just go here and say const is logged in, import that custom hook we just added, and I think we can say if we are logged in, we could just redirect back to the dashboard. So this is how we can add like some type of guard on our page so that when it first loads, like we verify if we're logged in or not. So let's try this out. Now what I should be able to do is do a hard refresh on this page, and it should take us back to the dashboard every time. Okay, there's a little flicker. It does show the initial screen because this thing does take some time to actually like finish loading. So we should probably also say const is loading. And this will be true, and then finally we'll say set loading is to false, and we'll pass that back. Okay, so now I could say is loading, and if we are currently loading the auth, we could probably just show some like loading text. Okay. Now instead of a loading text, we can also do something called a activity indicator. Okay, I think we just do this. Let's try this again. Okay, so that should work. We just need to make sure we put it inside a container so that it's centered on the screen. Okay, it's super fast, but it shows like a teeny little spinner there for like a really short amount of time, and then it shows up. There might be a different way to do like a route guard in Expo, but I think this is pretty cool. We built a new custom hook that hooks into the secure storage to get the token. It has a loading state in the token state. And then in our application, we can actually have loaders to verify if we're logged in or not. And we'll find out later the reason we're storing this token is because we're going to need that token and attach it to further fetch requests so that our API can authenticate the request and know that we are the correct user trying to make that request. All right, let's just commit this stuff. We did a lot of changes. I'm going to go ahead and say adding sign in, sign out, and adding JWT logic, and also deleting initial bootstrap code. All right, let's just go ahead and submit this. All right, let's move on to the dashboard page. So right now, all we have on the dashboard is just like displaying the token. And what we want to do instead is I want to show some tabs at the bottom. So like when you're logged in, you should be able to see your feed, create a new post, maybe modify your account information, and also maybe see some notifications. So if we want to have tabs show up, we can go in the dashboard and just make a new layout. So same thing as before, we make an underscore layout file, and then we can simply just export the layout function. So I'll say export layout will be a default function, and then we want to return some tabs. So I think we have a tabs component, which comes from that UI directory. And inside this tabs component, we can add a tab for the home page. This one we could just call feed, I guess. And then we could also like, okay, and then we can make another one for notifications. So I'll say notifications. We could do one for posting and then one for account or profile. I'll just call it account. So we are going to have 4 tabs show up at the bottom when you're on your dashboard. Now the way we're going to achieve this is we're going to have a nested grouping. So I can go here and I can say feed, I can make a post, I can make a notifications, and then I can make an account like this. So basically you can group all your tabs in these parentheses here. And then I can make another layout. I know it's kind of confusing. We have layouts inside of layouts. But inside this nested layout, that's where we're going to have our stack that's going to represent all the different screens that are going to be in this nested layout. So let's just make another layout like this. And instead of tabs, we're going to say stack like this. And inside the stack, we're going to say stack screen. And then the name is going to be the name of the files that should exist in this directory. So we're going to have one for index. I'll say index tsx. And then we're going to have one for post. So I'll make one called post. And then we are going to have one for notifications. So again, we'll just make one for notifications.tsx. And then finally, we want one for account. So account like this, and we'll make a new account tsx. So now we have 4 different files that represent what the screens will look like when you click on the different tabs. Let's just go ahead and make some default pages for all these. I'll just call this a page. We'll bring in a view and some text. Like this. And I'll go ahead and just copy and paste this into all these. This one will be the feed. This will be the notifications. And then this one will be the post, or create post, I guess you could call it. Now we are getting a little error here, but we'll get this working in just a second. The tab should show up. So let's find where we do a router push dashboard, which I'm not sure what page that's on. Like this. And instead of router push dashboard, I think this needs to be feed. Okay, so we're going to do the grouping here. Everywhere that we want to go to the dashboard, instead we'll just go straight to your feed when the user logs in or registers. Okay, just like this. You know, let me just copy this and we can just do /feed. Now you'll see down here, we have the actual tab showing up. We have another additional one. We'll have to like figure out how to get rid of that. But for all these, we can give them a title. So I can say like feed. And then now that's going to be fixed with feed. And we can also give it an icon. So I can say system image is going to be equal to house.fill. Okay, and now we got a house. I could do the same thing with the other ones. This one we'll just keep a plus, and then we have notifications and we have account. But there's also this additional index one that we're going to have to actually get rid of. Actually, I think I'm going to call this dashboard instead of feed. So it's going to say dashboard folder, and inside of this we have a grouping of dashboard, post, notifications, and account. And then the index is going to represent dashboard. It's kind of confusing, but this is how it's going to be. And then in this layout, I want to make sure that this says dashboard. And then this index file right here, technically we don't even need this one. We can kind of delete it. And we'll come back to this later. So let's just delete this dashboard page. And hopefully now, if I were to refresh this, it should show 4 tabs at the bottom. So we have feed, post, notifications, and account. Okay, so the tabs are going to be pointing to the different parameters of this routing group. Okay, and then inside of this layout, they are going to point to the different files inside of this directory. And then over here, when we do sign up, we're going to go to /dashboard and go to that first grouping, the dashboard group, which would point to the index. But now when I click on these tabs, like it doesn't actually redirect anything. So now on the main layout here where I have these tabs, I want to basically redirect the user to the correct paths or the correct hrefs. We'll say options. And then you can put href here, and I can say /dashboard like this. And that should go to the index here. And for the post, I'll go to /dashboard/post. And for this other tab, we're going to go to notifications. And then finally, we're going to go to the account. All right, so now we have all these different tabs that should go to the different pages when I click them. So when I click on this one, it should take you as a post, notifications, account. And I should be able to kind of go back, and it's basically stacking these based on how you press them. But some of these pages, I want to have them kind of swoop out differently based on if it's like a post, I want it to come up from the bottom. So like we could potentially use a card for that one, I think. We could say options, and we can just go ahead and pass a presentation, and I will say modal. Now when I click it, we'll have a post that pops up from the bottom. So it kind of keeps you on the main homepage. But it just allows you to kind of like post something, okay? And then for the notifications, again, we're going to do the same thing. Like we want notifications that pop up from the bottom. Just like that. And we can modify this. We could have like the title or the header title could be notifications. Over here, the header title could be create post. Okay, and then finally the account. That could be a card. So like we'll have that slide out. So we'll say options, presentation is a card. And that'll take you to the account page. And then a user can click back to go back to their main feed. So basically the feed is like the centralized place. And we have all these other screens that are basically like just stacked on top. So they can quickly, create a post and then close it down, go to their account and go back. And then of course we should probably give a header title here to make that say account. And then for this main index page, we don't even want this header to display at all. So the way you can do that is you can say header shown inside this options. Header shown is false. And now that should not show up anything. Now, one thing I'll point out is that like inside of these different pages, you can't see the content because you have to apply like a container to all these. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a container here and we're going to import that style sheet. And we could probably give it, instead of doing the flex stuff, I'm just going to say padding top and we could give it like 48 pixels or something and see how that looks. By the way, we are getting this little error here. I think this is related to calling router.push inside the render function. I think this might need to be a use effect. And we should probably only run this when isLoading is true here. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap that. And I think that should fix that issue, I hope. And of course, you need to make sure your effect happens before any conditional returns. Let's try that one more time. Okay, I think that got rid of that bug. All right, I promise we're going to make this look really nice here in a second, but let's just go ahead and commit what we have because I think we made some good progress. We're going to go ahead and just say adding tabs to dashboard. All right, let's focus on the create a post page. I think that's probably the most important part is like, can a user create a post? And then we'll go back and display it on the index/feed page. And we want to, instead of rendering out some text that says create post, we're going to add in some form fields. So let's go back to the sign-in page and we're going to follow a similar approach here where we're going to grab some of this code and we will just go ahead and post this in there like this. And we'll just go ahead and make some styles. Go ahead and import the style sheet, import the input, and we need to keep some state here. So this will be like the post text. And we'll just go ahead and do this. And then for the input itself, let's go and find some input. Go grab this input and we are going to put it here. At some point, we could probably come back through here and like componentize this text input so the styling lives here. And so that we're not copying styling all over our page. We might do that in just a second. Let's grab the label and we'll paste that there as well. And then for use state, let's go ahead and import that. So now if we go and open the post, we should see an input here, which should allow you to type. Now, unfortunately, I think the text is just not visible. I'm not sure why. Now, this post is like at the very top. I think what we need to do is we need to give the whole view a little bit of like, give it a container so that we can actually push it down. And we could probably say like margin top of 48 and see if that kind of makes it go down a little bit. You might even want to do like 100. Let's try 128. Okay, and then inside of the container, I mean, we could probably give this like a width of 80% or something like we did on the other page. We might be able to give this a flex of 1 and then also like center it on the page. Maybe do 90. Let's try 90. So you could do it that way, or you could also just give it some padding. Maybe padding on the left or horizontal might be good. Let's try 16. Okay, that's probably a little bit better. And then on the field, let's grab that styling too, just to have a little bit of gap. All right. Delete the existing field. Okay, so now we have like a create post modal that pops up. And then a user should be able to type in here. Now I want to make this multi-line, so I think I can just say multi-line if true. And then on the input itself, let's go here. I'm going to give it a height of 100 and see if we can kind of expand this. So then a user can come in here and actually type out a long post. For the label, I'm going to say, what do you want to say? And then we can also add a button. So then underneath the view here, we'll just go ahead and add a app button like we did before. We should probably have a function that it calls called handle post. And for right now, we can just console log the post contents. And I'm curious, what else do we need here? I'm going to click on post again, load it up. We could probably make this full screen and give some gap between this. So like the whole container itself, we should say gap of 12. And then the post button itself, I think we could probably align this to the right. So one way you could do it, well, I think we could just say style, and I'll say like styles post button. And then down here, I'll say post button, and we want to give it a full width. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, although the user can like slide down to cancel this, I think it would be better, like a better user experience, if they could actually click a back button in the header. So we're going to go one step back to the layout. And I think here we can actually design like what the header will have in it. So let's go here. I'm going to say header left, and you can actually have this return a React component. So I'm going to go ahead and just make it return a button like this. And then when you press it, it's going to go ahead and do a router.back. And I think you can also give it a title that says cancel. And let's just do this. Do a self-closing. Now router is not defined here, so like we'll have to go ahead and import it. Right. And then button also, we need to import that from React Native. So now if I look at this, there's a cancel button. And if you click it, it'll just close this whole thing. Okay, looks pretty good. Now I honestly wonder, do we need the title that says create post here? Like, do we actually need it to say create post? I think we could also just clear that out. And it's kind of obvious that we're posting something. And if we're going to do that, I think we could just also remove the margin top. We could do like 48. Okay, a little bit much. How about 66? Okay, that looks a little bit better. And then for the padding, right, 18. I just want to bring it in so it's like in line with the cancel button. So like maybe 24. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so now if you click cancel, it basically just goes back, which is going to automatically collapse this thing. But they can also just click and drag it down if they want to. Okay, there's different ways they can close it. All right, so now when a user tries to click on post, we want to send data to an API, and then that API needs to store data to a backend. And we also need to run some authentication on that backend code. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll do a fetch request to API post. And then that's going to do a post request. It's going to send over the post text, and then we should get back some type of response. And if we do, we'll just go ahead and automatically close this thing. So I'll just say const router, go ahead and import that so we can actually do a router.back. If the response was not good, I'll just go ahead and show an alert. Something went wrong. Okay, go ahead and submit this, and it shouldn't work right now because there is no API post. So we just get back as something went wrong. We could not post your post. All right, so now let's move on to creating the API. So if we go to API, we can make a file called post plus API.tsx, and I'm actually going to call this API posts. I like making my API endpoints plural if you're trying to do like REST APIs. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's go and grab an example endpoint, and I'm gonna go ahead and just delete this stuff, and all we need to get back is the post text, I believe, which we called post, so it just needs to be called post. And then finally we could probably just return the same information that we created. So at this point we need to know what user is making the post and verify that they're logged in. So like that authentication token is on the header, so we could basically make a method here. I could say function get user, and we could go ahead and get the authorization header and split it and get the bearer token. And if it doesn't exist, we can just go ahead and return undefined. But if it does exist, then we can basically verify the token. So I can say const decoded is equal to jwt.verify, And we're going to go ahead and make sure we import that. Okay, so this is how we can basically take the token that's in the request header and then verify the JWT that's being passed in from the iPhone app and check if it's valid. And if this thing is not valid, it's going to throw an exception, I believe. Let's see, does this thing throw in synchronously verify? Yeah, this should throw an exception if it's not valid. So technically I should probably say try, and then otherwise we'll say catch an error, and then we'll return undefined. Okay, and if we do get back a token, all we need to do is we can say const user is equal to await db.query users find first, and then we're going to get the user based on the ID that's in that token. Because when we sign the token, I think we are actually, let's go up here and look at the utility. I think we have an auth utility. So yeah, when we sign it, we just give it an ID. Technically, I could give this user ID. That might be a better thing to put on that thing. Some people also might call this sub, S-U-B, but I'm just going to call it user ID. And then we should get back the user ID like this as string. And this is complaining because we have to actually like cast this to be an object that has a user ID. So this should look up the user in the database, and if the user exists, then we can return them. Otherwise, we're going to return user ID. So now we have this function we can call like this, and I'm going to say const user is equal to await get user. And if the user doesn't exist, we could just go ahead and return an unauthorized status response to that user. But yeah, now that we know that the user exists, we can go ahead and try to create a post. But we don't have schema defined for that. So let's go here. I'll say schema. And we're going to make one for posts. So I'll say export const posts. We'll just go ahead and make a new table like this. And the only difference is this is going to have a user ID that's going to reference the ID that was up here. Okay, so there's like a relationship going on here. Let's go back to the API. And now we should be able to say const post is equal to await. And then we're going to insert a new post. And we're going to make sure that the user ID is passed to it. But then we're also going to make sure that's text. Did I call it text? I did. We're going to make sure that the text is the post information that was passed in. I might call this new post. And then this could say returning like this. And this could be a new like that. And then we're going to go ahead and return the new post information, which I could just do this. All right, so now we have a post endpoint that takes in the post. I might actually change this to text so it's a little bit more clear. And then that's going to verify the user's logged in. And then we're going to create a new post and assign it to that user ID. And then we return that created post. So I think if I go back to this endpoint here, I just need to call this a text. And honestly, this could be called text. And this could be called set text. Just so it's a little bit more clear. Yeah, so there's probably some edge cases and error handling we could add to both of these. And we could also make like a middleware function to make this a little cleaner to do this logic. But let's just test this out. And I want to make sure we're on the right path. So over here, I'm going to load up my terminal. And I'll say bun run db generate. And that should generate a new table. Oh, I think the issue is this references thing. This is not how you do it. We could just actually say not null. Like this. And then here we can actually give it an index. So in a database, typically you can give indexes to certain columns. So it's faster to look them up. And I think we'll want to be able to look up all posts by user ID. So we could do this. We could just import this index from PG Core. Yeah, and I think that should be good. Let's try to do a db generate now. And now you can see we have this messy Betty Ross over here, which creates a new post table. And when I apply that migration script, if I go over to Drizzle and just refresh, you'll see that we have a post table now, right? So this is where we're going to store the posts that users create. And we can later fetch those and display them on like the feed page based on different criteria. Or if you want to write your own little algorithm, you could do that. All right, so let's try to post this and see what happens. It looks like it's not working. So I think adding maybe a console log here so we can actually see maybe the response that comes back might help us debug a little bit. Okay, here's our response. Let's try to figure out if there is anything in here that helps us. Right now, it doesn't look like status 401, which I think would be this one. So for some reason, it's not able to actually get the user from the request. Oh, and the issue is because we did not even pass in the authorization header. So when we do that fetch request, we need to actually attach the token. So let me just go ahead and add that in. And the token we don't have defined yet, but we can actually grab that by just getting the token from that useAuth hook that we created. And so now when the fetch request runs, it should attach that to the header request. Let me try this out. Testing, click post. It looks like we still got a 401 status. So I think we have to just further debug this a little bit. I'm not sure if it's because I used a capital A here and this one's not getting it. So let's just console log the token. And then let's also console log the request headers real quick and see if we can debug this. Do it again. All right, we have authorization, we have bearer. This took the token. It should have printed the token. Here's a token. If it's not defined, we will return undefined. Otherwise, we're going to decode it using the JWT secret. It could be failing here or it could be failing here. So just simply adding a console log in this catch could probably help us out a little bit. Try it again. All right, now we actually have an error that we can see. Undefined values are not allowed. So where is that getting called from? I'm guessing it's getting called from this. I think what happened is we logged in with the JWT that has a different ID in it, and then we did some refactoring. So if I actually print out the decoded token, yeah, it just has an ID. So I need to basically force myself to log out, which I can't do right now. So I think on the account page, we could probably pivot and just add a logout button, which basically just needs to clear out that secure storage token and then redirect back to the home page. We're going to come back and revisit fixing this post API. I just need a way to log out. I'm not sure how to do it programmatically, honestly. So let's just load up the account real quick, and literally I'm just going to add a quick little button. I'll add like a pressable button. And when you click it, I want to go ahead and clear out the secure storage. I could say secure delete. And then we'll just delete the token, and then we'll go back to the home page. So I think we can just bring in the router here. Make sure we bring in pressable. Actually, I could just make this a button, honestly. Just make it a button, it'd be easier. Give it a title of logout. And I don't think this takes any children. Okay, the logout button is all the way up here. It's like barely even visible. So what I'm going to do is just make this a container as well. And I'll just give that a style of container. We're going to import this one. And this will actually be a margin top. And let's see if we can bring that down. Let me get rid of the text here. All right, there's the logout button. I'll get rid of that. So now if I click logout, that should hopefully remove the token and force us to go back to the sign in page. So that looks like it's working. Let's try to sign in again. My email, my password, click sign in. And that should create a new token with the correct structure, because before we were logged in and we had that stored in our simulator, and it was just a bad thing. So now if we go to post, I'm hoping we can actually create a post now. Okay, everything seems like it's working fine. Go back to the database and we will refresh, and we have that testing message that we just posted. And it's attached to that user that we are logged in as. Cool, so I think this is working fine. Just a little bit of debugging along the way, which, you know, it happens. So let's just go ahead and get rid of any of those console logs I added in. Okay, delete that one. Okay. All right, so we have the ability to create a post. That's awesome. We could probably come back and add some like form level validation, because right now you can post something with no data on it. So we should go and create some type of validation at least, at the bare minimum. So over here, when we submit this thing, the backend could just be the one responsible for checking to make sure that there is data in the post. So if we go here, I'm going to say if there is no text, we could just say text is required. And for right now, let's just do backend validation. It just makes everything a little bit easier than having to come in and do like front client side validation. Okay, so now if you try to post this, is we could not post your post. I think it'd be better if there's a little bit of better information about what's going on. So we could just go ahead and log out the error that actually happens. So now it says text is required. Probably make this a little bit more descriptive. Your post requires some text. Okay, so we're making some progress. One thing I don't really like is how this is just coded right inside this component. It would be better, in my opinion, if we had an API directory here. I'll make an API directory, and then we're going to make a file called post.tsx, and I want to make one called create post. So export async function create post, and we could just go ahead and return this fetch. It's going to take in a string and it's going to take in a token. And instead of saying router back here, we're actually going to either just throw an exception or return the data that came back. So we're going to go ahead and say if the response is okay, return the response JSON. Otherwise, return a new error. Okay, and that's going to allow us to basically go here, and then I could just simply go create post, and then we're going to call it, and then we're going to do all this logic. This makes the code a little bit cleaner, and then if you wanted to be able to call a create post endpoint on other pages, you could easily just import this function and do it. So we're abstracting away our API layer from our front-end code, which makes your code a little bit more maintainable, in my opinion. All right, let's go to the feed. So now we need to basically do something for getting all of the posts in the application. So when this feed page loads, what we could do is render out a list of feed items. So let's go and make a new API endpoint. So I'll say posts API. And instead of a post request, we want to do a GET request. So I could just go ahead and just do a GET. Now you'll see here we are already doing the authentication logic, which is good. But we want to get the posts back from the database. So we can just go ahead and do something like this. Just get all the posts back and return that to the user. And then we don't even need to do a where clause. Instead, I think we could just do an order by, and we want to get the latest posts in the system. And then also we could probably limit them. Like you don't want users to fetch back all the posts in your system. So I'll limit to 20, and then that should return back. And later on, we could add maybe pagination or like a ability to send a size and a limit so that users can get a chunk of posts at the same time when they're scrolling. All right, we have an endpoint we can call, and now let's go to that new API file that we created up here. And I'm going to go ahead and say get all posts, or just get posts, right? And that's going to do a fetch request to the post endpoint. Technically, we probably should pass in some of this information like the options. We don't need to pass a body, but we do want to do a get request, and we want to pass in the token. I'm going to go ahead and just make the token required because you want the backend to maybe change what posts are returned based on the user's preferences. I don't know if we'll implement that in this tutorial, but it's probably good to just try it. And then we can go ahead and do that. Okay, so then in the index, all we need to do is call this endpoint now. So like when this page is first loading, we could bring in like a use effect and then call that endpoint. I think at this point, what I would like to do is bring in React Query. It's also called tan stack query. So tan stack query is like a utility function you can use for making API requests. I'm going to go ahead and just add it with bun. And I'll run this here. And then once you have it added in, you need to wrap your code with a provider, I believe. So let's go here and just read through here. So we need to make a query client, and we're going to do that in the top level layout here. So I'll make a query client. Probably go ahead and import that. And then we just need to wrap our code with this. Okay, so we'll do this, and we'll import that query client provider. And we're going to wrap all of our code. And then later on, you'll have access to do something like this. Use query or use mutation. So right now, we want to do a query. So I'm going to grab this code, and then we're going to go back to our main feed page. And then I'll paste this in, and I'm going to call this posts. We're going to import use query. And then for the query function, we want to call get posts from that API method we just created. And sometimes you have to actually like do an anonymous callback like this so that we can get the token. And then the token would have to come from this auth. Okay, so the way a React query, or I guess tan stack query works is you call use query. And once you call that, you can pass it a query key, and this is going to be used for caching the results. So as you're navigating between pages, stuff will load instantly because it's going to cache in memory the previous post that we have, and then behind the scenes, it'll do another fetch to get the latest updated. And this is the method we're telling it to use. So this is just going to do the API request to our backend to get the posts. Okay, and then for this, we can actually say data, and then we're going to rename that to posts. And the cool thing about use query is it gives you some helper state. So I can say like, is loading. So I can tell if this page is currently in the process of trying to fetch some posts over or not. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to try to check if it's loading. We'll display loading. And then otherwise, we are going to render out every post that we get. Now, it would be nice if we had a way to type this, because right now there is no type. So if you go back to the post API where we're doing this get request. So I'm going to go here and say export type get post response. And we want to actually just have this be an array of posts. So if we go back to our schema, something I haven't showed you yet is here you can actually export a type of post. And then you can say type of posts, which is our table, and you say infer select. And now if you hover over this, you'll have the same types used to declare or define what a post is. So let's go here and I'll say this will be an array of posts like this. And then on our front end, the API that we're calling over here, this thing could return, instead of just saying promise all, we could go here and just say as get post response, so that there's a typing between the back end and the front end. And this will allow us to go to that post page. And now if you hover over data, it says get post response, which will have, I believe, an array of posts. Okay, so we can like map over it. So now on the right, you can see it says testing. We just need to apply a little bit of style here. So we have like a container style like we do on the other page. I'll just say margin top of 200 and just import this. Okay. And now we could probably style this to actually look like a post. So like we could have an avatar on the left. We could probably have some date and the username on the right. And then we can have like the post information down below. So let's make another component here. I'll say function post component, and that'll take in a post as a property. And we want to just return probably a view for right now. And then that view could just have that post data. And then I want to, instead of rendering out text here, I could just go ahead and do the post component, and then we'll pass in the key in the post. Say post equals the post. And that should be good. So now it should render out all the posts for us the same way, but we want to kind of style this a little bit nicer. So we're going to go ahead and say, style this to look like a Twitter post entry. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so it basically made a bunch of views and some styles. And then down here, I'll say implement the styles for the Twitter post component. Okay, so just a bunch of placeholder styles for right now. Let's save this and kind of see what it can look like. Okay, so we have these little posts that are popping up. Okay, I don't see where it's putting testing. It's probably because the text is all white. I think the background color, I should probably make something darker. What we could do is also remove that margin. I think there's quite a lot of margin there. So maybe like 100 or something would be better. And then we're going to make a bunch of posts so we can actually get like realistic data for when there's a lot of stuff we have to look at. So like I could just go ahead and start putting in a bunch of things. And one thing I'll point out is that when I post something new, it doesn't seem to ever update my feed. So we could probably add something to rerun that invalidate query. All right, let me just keep adding. I think I added like 5 or 6 of them. I think we should just keep adding a couple more. The issue now is that I can't scroll this thing, right? So I need to change this. Instead of a view, I can make it a body scroll view, which is coming from that UI directory that we kind of had initially over here. There's just a couple of other components we can start using now, like a body scroll view. So that just allows us to scroll this, which is nice, right? A user can actually scroll through the posts. So one thing I want to do is I want to actually format this. Instead of it being like a date, I want it to actually show like how many hours or days ago this thing was posted. So there's another library we can install called datefns. So let's do a bun add date-fns. And then I can go to the feed. So I think we're on the right page here. I'll go to the feed. I'll import this format distance to now from that library. And then instead of doing this whole like to local date thing, we should just be able to pass in the date. And now it should look a little bit better. I think I might have to restart the UI to be able to import that thing. So now it says 3 minutes ago, 17 minutes ago, and it should eventually say hours or days ago. I think that's a better approach than showing like an actual date. So now, how do we get the username displayed? And right now, we don't even have a way to store the username. Like if we go back to the database schema, there's an email. I don't think you want to leak people's emails to the browser. So we should probably add like a display name to the user, or we could have some type of like profile table. I might go with the profile table just because it makes it a little bit easier. So I'll say export const profiles. And this is going to link to a user. And we're going to have a name. Okay, we could probably just create this profile when a user first creates an account or signs in. And then later on, they can go and change whatever the display name is. Let's say display name like this. And then, of course, we'll probably add an index here, just like we did on the other ones, so that we can have the user ID be the primary key, basically. And I think also this should say unique. We don't want multiple profiles with the same user ID, so I'm going to add a unique clause here. And we also want to link the user table with the profiles table. So how do we do that? Let's go to the bottom, and I'm going to say const profile relations. And then we can say relations, and then we're going to say, and then we want to link the profiles to the user. So let's just go ahead and say 1, like this. And then we could say user is going to link to the users. And I think also we can say user relations, and we're going to do the other way. So we'll say 1, a user can link to 1 profile. I think we might need to export these as well. Let's do that. Okay, so hopefully everything is set up good. And what we're going to do now is when a user signs up, we're going to create a profile and give them like a default display name, which they can come back later and change. So let's go back to sign up. And that is going to call an API endpoint called sign up. Again, we should probably refactor this to be part of this API folder. I'm going to call this auth. Actually, no, I'm going to call this users. We'll do users, and then we're going to go ahead and just say export async function create user. We're going to call that method here. Actually, I'm going to call it sign up instead of create user. And then some of the stuff we don't need to do in this file, we can basically just return the JSON if it comes back. Otherwise, we're going to return an error like this. We should probably come back and do the same thing with login, but let's go back to the sign up page, and instead we're going to call sign up. And then we can go ahead and just like pass in the email and the password like this. And instead of response, we'll get a new user here. We can go ahead and just like, actually, no, we should get a token back. So we'll get the token. We should be able to save that, redirect. Otherwise, we should probably get the error and just like display it or something in an alert. Should be good. Now the issue is sign up doesn't seem like it takes an email and password, does it? Email and password. Oh, I need to just pass it in like this. Okay, so while we're at it, let's go to sign in, and we're gonna do the same thing. Like we're just gonna try to clean up this code along the way so that it's more maintainable. Export async function sign in, and then we're gonna go ahead and run this. Same idea, get rid of all this stuff. Go ahead and refactor this a little bit. Okay. I could probably make a helper function to like not have to keep on duplicating the same like if statement. We won't do that just yet. So let's go here. We'll call sign in. We're going to invoke it with email and password. We're going to do a then. Again, we should get a token back. And we could just do this. Otherwise, we will just do a catch and show an alert. Okay. So now right now this user we have in the database doesn't have a profile, but what we just changed is we need to have this sign up create a profile if one doesn't exist when the user first signs up. So let's go to the sign up API, And after we create the user, we're also going to create a profile. So I'll just say like for a, create the profile. And then we're going to go ahead and just insert a profile like this. And we should be good now. Now, just to verify this, let's go and delete all of our data. Let's just refresh, delete all these posts. Let's also delete the user. And then I'm going to go ahead and just sign out. And then we're going to sign back up. Actually, no, before we sign up, I don't want it to just have display name of email. I want this to generate a random username. So there's a library called Unique Username Generator. Let's just go ahead and bun install this as well, or bun add it. Grab this. We'll go here. We'll say bun add. We'll bring that library in. Probably have to restart my bun service. And then what you could do is if you want to generate a random username, you can call something like this. I think we can just do this one, and we'll do like a space for the separator. So let's go and say const username or display name is equal to this. We'll do a space. Again, like this is just so like when they sign up, they have like some unique random thing. Because you don't want to expose their real name to people, and you don't want to expose their email. And we didn't ask them for their actual like real name when they signed up. So we're going to bring in this method, and we're going to use that display name here. So I forgot to run my db generate to make the new migration script, and I realized that this index needs to be more unique. So I'm going to say post user ID index. Let's try to run a generate now, and then I'll go ahead and run a migrate, and that should apply it to my database. All right, let's check out the database. We have the profile now. All right, let's just go ahead and try to sign up one more time and click sign up, and that should create the user account, and it should hopefully also create a profile. So if we go over here, we have a profile now. Now the reason we did this is so that we can join the post to the profiles so we can get the display name for these users. So I think what we could do now is let's just create a post. I'll say like testing, and then we'll go back to our main feed and I'll just refresh. And now we have that post coming back. So let's go to our main post page. That is going to call our get post API, so posts plus API. And then here we basically need to join the post with the profile. So I think right now I would need to double check if the posts are connected to the profiles. I don't think they are, so we might have to add one more here. We can say post relations, and we're going to actually hook this up with the profile. So like a post can be linked to a profile. And the reason we're adding this is because when you do that, it allows you to go here and I can say with profile. Okay, and then we can actually grab the display name from the profile or other fields if we want to. And then we just need to update our type a little bit. So here we could say like post with profile. So I could do an ampersand, I believe. And we'll just join that with profile display name so that we can get that information back. All right, a lot of stuff going on, but hopefully this kind of makes sense. Now what we could do is I want to display the profile name above the timestamp. So right here, I think we could probably just put the profile name like this. Post profile does not seem to exist on this. So let's try to figure out, oh, it's because I have, this needs to be typed as get post response. And get the first one, and then we should get the display name at some point. Now let's go ahead and just put this on top of the timestamp. So like I think I can go here. We can wrap this in a view so that they're all in the same row. And then this could just be some text. And this could be the display name. Like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. And yeah, I mean that's a pretty good start to a post. So now as we create more posts, we should be able to see the display name show up. And everything should be good. Now, one thing that's bothering me is when you create a new post, it doesn't seem like it shows up on your own feed. So what we could do is in the post page, so we'll go over here to the post page, we actually want to invalidate the handstack query client. So we're going to say const client query is equal to use query client. And then we can just simply invalidate that post key. So just like this, now when I go and create a new post, it should refetch the data and repopulate that page for us. See how fast that was? So like instantly it'll just refresh and show us the post. And the latest post should be at the top. All right, let's just go ahead and commit what we've done because we've done quite a lot of changes. So I'm gonna go ahead and say showing the post on the feed. Okay, so I think the next thing I want to work on is the ability to change your display name. So like we could kind of work more on the account page a little bit. So let's go to the account page and just kind of look at it. It's very plain. So let's go to account. So we're going to use some of these components over here so we can make like a nice looking account page, I think. So let's first style this logout button to make it look more like something like this. So I just want like a button here they can click and that'll just log them out. And so you can create a stack, I believe. Let me scroll down a little bit. Okay, so if you look here, there's like a form section. I'm going to grab this whole thing as an example, and then we're going to paste that into our code right here. And then I'm going to say import star as form from that form component. And I'm going to delete some of these stacks. So I'm going to delete this stack. And I think we could probably just like get rid of color here. Just see how this looks like. So if you go to account, you'll see that we have a write text. All right, this looks a little messed up. I think I need to also add in a form list. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this here, and we'll add that at the bottom. Okay, this looks good. So instead of saying write text, we're going to say security. And I'm going to get rid of all this actually, and just put a logout button here. Okay, and then we could probably just delete the token and replace the router with the home page. We could also add an icon here. So I think there's a way to do system icons. Let's find where we do icons. Okay, here's an icon symbol. So we should be able to put that here and then import the icon symbol. This is looking kind of weird for styling. I think what I should actually do is put this in a H stack, the form H stack. And then we could go ahead and wrap this whole thing in an H stack. And I can move the icon to be first. And this is going to kind of like space it out left, right. And we should probably do like a sign out button. Okay, so we could do this and then we can make this red. So system red. Okay. And so now we should be able to click this and it should sign us out like it did before. And then I can get rid of the logout button that's up here because we don't need that anymore. So we could do the same thing inside this form list. We are going to copy this section like this. We'll put this up here and I'll just say like profile. And then what we could do is do an H stack. And then this could be like an info. I'll do info. And then over here, instead of saying sign out, we'll just make this a text input. Hopefully this will kind of work. Okay, so now that I can actually type into it. And we should probably make this blue or system white. I'll make this light text. And then for the input itself, we could add some styling here. We'll just go ahead and say style inputs, and then we'll style that a little bit. So it's ordered. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then what we could do is probably add like a save icon to the right of it. So I'm going to grab this icon and then I'll put it here. And we could have this be like a save. Does it have like a check mark? Yeah, we can make this that color and I'll say system green. So you know to click this to hopefully save it. And then we just need to get the profile name. So right now when this account loads, we have to fetch the profile information and we don't have an endpoint for doing that. So let's go over here to our API and I will make one called profiles plus API TSX. And then we'll say export async function get. Now at this point we need to do authentication and like we're copying and pasting the same code a bunch of different places. So I may actually just add a utility here and I'll say like with auth. And we're going to go ahead and just create a function that's going to basically be a factory function. So we could go ahead and just return a function like this. And then wherever we're calling get user, which was here, we can grab this whole code. And we are instead going to do it inside of get auth. So I'll go ahead and do this. We're going to need to bring in JWT. Like that. We'll probably need Drizzle. We'll need the database stuff. The same idea though. Basically, it's going to split the token. It's going to get the user from the database, and then we can actually start using that here. And if the user is not defined, we'll say unauthorized, and finally we're going to call a handler that we're going to pass in. And this thing could be a user information. I think we have to go to our schema and make a user. So I'm going to go ahead and say export type. We'll do a profile and a user. Okay. So now we should be able to import this user here. And now we have a with auth method. So let's try using this with auth. So we'll do export const get is equal to, and then we'll say with auth, and we're going to import that. And I'll say async. And then down here, we're just going to close this. And now instead of saying get user, the user should be passed in for us to use. We can get rid of that, and we can get rid of that. Okay, so this makes our code a little bit cleaner because this is going to make sure that you are authenticated before you can call certain endpoints, right? And so we could basically refactor all this to use the with auth stuff instead of us having to like manually do it every time. So like this will also go, this will go away. We don't need that. That looks pretty good. Let's go to profiles. We're going to do the same thing for the get. So we'll say get is equal to with auth, import that, import all the profile stuff, delete that, delete that, make sure you import the database, import profiles, and EQ. Okay, so now we have a method that we can call, and it's going to get the profile that's associated with the currently logged in user. Okay, so that was a decent little refactoring there. I think it makes the code a little bit better since we have this like with auth middleware function. Let's go back to the UI in the account, and we want to use a use query and call an API method. So let's go back to here. We need to make one called profiles. And then I'll say export async function get profile. I might just call it get my profile. And we don't even need to pass in a user ID. We will need to pass in a token though. And what this is going to do is it's going to do something similar to this. So let's just grab this code and paste it in. This will be API profiles. It's going to do a get request. Doesn't need to pass in a body, but it does need to pass in the token. And then we'll get the response back and we can do something with it. So let's go back to account, and I'll say const data profile equals use query. And then we just simply need to call get my profile and pass it in the token. Then we'll have to get the token from that useAuth hook that exists in our front end. And now that we have the profile information, which isn't typed, so we should probably go back here and type this as a thing that returns a profile. So I'll do this, make it a promise that returns a profile. And then if you go over here, this should now be a typed profile. And let's just go ahead and fill in this input. So we'll say value is equal to profile display name. And this should have loaded some information. Let's just do a hard refresh here. I'll just refresh this. We're getting an issue. It says route handler is not defined. Export const get. Oh, I think it's because I have an async here. That's probably the issue. Try to refresh. Okay, that was the issue. A little async issue. So now if I go to account, this should have fetched, oh, there it is. It fetched the information and it displayed it. So let's go back to the account page and let's find that input. And we just want to kind of like style this to say color of light text. Okay. So now we want a user to be able to change this, which right now you can't because the on change is not even hooked up to this text. So we're going to go ahead and make some state. I'll say like display name is going to be equal to the profile's display name. And then we're going to use the display name here instead of the profile itself. We'll use the display name. And hopefully we can add an on change to this thing. So we can actually update this. Okay. And then we just need to add a click listener or pressable listener to the check button. All right, so let's do an on press. And then we want to basically just invoke a update profile. We're going to call that function, and we'll say function update profile, and that needs to call a method to update the profile. So let's go here. We should probably add a new API method here called update profile. And that should do a post request to profiles, or it could do a put request. We should probably attach the token and do like the normal stuff. And then we will just go ahead and call this method from our code over here. This one I'm renamed to handle update profile, so it's not like a naming collision. And then we'll go down here and call this. And this will take the current state display name, and we're going to go ahead and pass in the token as well. It looks like this is complaining because it could potentially be undefined, so let's just do a return here. Okay, and so if there's an error, we'll just do an alert like we normally do. And then we don't need a finally. So now it's a matter of updating the endpoint. So let's go over here. We're going to add a put, which is going to be an authorized endpoint. And then we're going to update the profile information for that user ID using the display name that they're passing in. And then we should probably like do a check. If this thing is not defined, we should not allow them to update their profile information. Okay, so it's the start of a account page. All right, let's test this out. So the idea is I should be able to change this to like web dev Cody, and I should be able to click on the save button. And right now there's no like feedback to the user. So I don't know if this even worked. Go back to our feed. Oh, it didn't work because you cannot do an on press on a symbol. This would have to be a pressable like this. And then we'd have to move the on press to this. So now let's try this. If I did a web dev Cody and clicked update, and then go back to my feed, it then updates to web dev Cody. And then we should probably add some feedback. I think when this page first loads, the input is kind of empty. So maybe having like a loading indicator or something. I think there's a little issue with initializing state because we're getting the profile from this use query. So technically we could default this to empty. And then I think we just do like a use effect here. And then when the profile information actually changes, we can update the state to have that new profile information. Let's click here and it should get populated. Let's just do a hard refresh just in case. And I'll go to that account and it gets added in. We could probably have a loading indicator or something. So when this thing is loading, I'll just say is loading profile. Let's go back to the input, and instead of showing an input, we're going to show some type of activity indicator. Like this. Let's try it again. Let's click on account. We should see a loading indicator and then it shows up. I'm going to make this actually light text. I'm finding this confusing. So I'll make it just a light text. And if you want to save it, you can click that. And I do want this pressable to only show if it's done loading. But the issue is when I put it inside of here, it's going to cause it to like be weird with the styling. So like, I think I'll just say like, if it's not loading the profile, then we can show this as well. This will just make it look nicer. Let's just refresh, load the profile. We got this, and then it shows. Yeah, and let's also do it so when you click on the checkbox, we're going to just have some temporary state that shows for like a second to make it green. So we can go ahead and just do like a is saving. And then when I click on handle update profile, I'll say is saving is true. And that'll do a set timeout. And we'll say set is saving is false after 1 second. And then we can use that is saving boolean to change the color of that check. I think here I could say if it's saving, we will do AC.light. I guess system green. Otherwise we'll do light. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to click on the checkbox. It'll be green for a second. Maybe even 2 seconds would be better. I'll do 1400. I don't know the best way. I'm not a mobile developer. Maybe like having an alert pop up could be one approach. Or some type of animation or a double check. Yeah, maybe a double check. Is that what people do? A double check? I don't know, something like that maybe. I don't know. You guys can tell me, but I think it's good enough. So now we have a way to actually save the profile information, and then that will display on the feed or any other place that that profile information is used. Now there's a little issue. There's like stuff getting cut off on this thing. I think the view itself, I'll probably get rid of the view. I'm going to go ahead and just put this here and get rid of the view and see if that fixes our issue. Okay. Yeah, let's just double check something. I want to make sure that the styling is good. Yeah, this looks good. All right, this is awesome. Let's just go ahead and say add ability to update profile information. And we'll go ahead and just commit that. So one little thing that's kind of bothering me is when I click on this account button, it does show the account screen, but like this tab icon isn't highlighted. I might just change this to be a modal so that it's almost like the feed is always like the main page underneath. So like all these extra icons literally just open up cards on top. I think I might go with that approach. It just makes a little bit more sense. Maybe I'll keep the title and just say your account. Maybe I'll call it settings instead. It seems like more of a settings page. So if I'm going to do that, let's go over here, and instead of saying account here, I'll say settings. And let's see how this works. Okay, and then instead of a person icon, like maybe we could do like a gear cog. Okay, I think this makes a little bit more sense. All right, so I want to make another card pop out if we click on the actual name of the user. So let's go to our post component here, and we're going to make this thing pressable. So we'll say like pressable, and if you click it, we are going to show, or sorry, we're going to navigate the user to dashboard profile, and then we want to send them to the post's user ID. I think we need to import the router, which we haven't done yet, so let's do that. And we haven't created a page for this. So let's go in the dashboard. I'm going to make a new folder called profile. And inside of that folder, I can make a file called bracket user ID. This is how you can use like parameters inside your routes. And then we'll make a profile page. So let's just do this. Just make a really basic screen that should show some text. And then finally, I think in the layout, we need to add another stack screen. Let's add one for profile. We'll call it profile. And I don't know if I need that. I'll make it let's save this and see if it works. Oh yeah, we do need the /bracket ID so it knows what route to kind of map to. All right, let's click on this and see what happens. So it's not able to find it. I think I might need to just do a hard refresh on some of this stuff. So I'm going to restart my bun start. Just reload the app and click on my name. I think I might have to put it in the grouping actually. Let me put it in the grouping so it has access to a layout. All right, let's click it, and now it's showing the profile like it did before. But also just add, let's add back this cancel button. Actually, I don't want this to be a modal. I want this to be a card. Let's just make it a card so that we can click on this back button and go back to the index. I don't like how this says index though, so we might want to just like say back. In fact, I really don't like this. I might just actually say header shown and just say false. I don't want to show it at all. And we'll just do a custom profile there. Okay, so let's go back to the profile page, and we want to make a really basic looking profile to show like the avatar at the top, maybe their name, and then maybe how many followers they have or something like that. So let's go to the profile page. And the first thing we could probably do is render out a rounded view for the avatar. Make, let's say styles avatar. And then we'll make a styles down here. Go ahead and import this, make sure it's rounded. Background color, I'll say white. And then we will try to use this avatar. There you go. And we should probably put a container on this so we can center it. So we'll say container. I'll put that at the top. I think for justify contents, I'll say flex start. Move it to the top. And then the container itself could have a margin top of 100. See if we can bring it down some. Maybe 80. That's good. So if you pretend, there should be a picture of their image there. And then we could probably show their display name. So we don't know what their display name is. So we're going to have to fetch that, right? So we probably need to add a new API endpoint where we can pass in a user ID to get information about the user. So on the API itself, we're going to make a folder called profiles. And then inside of here, we can say user ID .tsx. And that'll let us do a GET request to get the profile by the user ID. So we'll have to get like the user ID from the params. I think we might actually have to say like request.url.splice or something. Yeah, we'll just split it and get the last thing. Okay, so this should give us like the very last token in the URL, assuming they don't have like any extra like trailing slashes here. And then what we could do is we need to get the profile by that user ID if it's defined, but there's a chance that it might not be defined. So let's just go ahead and put a little if statement here. Oh, this doesn't need to be curly braces. All right. So we get the user ID from the URL, make sure it's defined, and then we look up the profile using that user ID, and then we return it. The profile is not defined. I guess we could just return undefined. So this should hopefully be good. So now we need to go to our profiles API method, and we can just say like export a function called getProfile, which will take in a user ID and a token. And then that's going to do a GET request to that endpoint, make sure it passes a token. We don't need to pass a body. And then we should probably just type the response to be a profile. I don't think we have a profile in the schema. Oh yeah, we do. So let's just go promise profile. So we should be able to call this method from our front end now using a query. So I'll say const data profile is equal to use query. And then we're going to go ahead and just make that request like this. And we're going to call the profile, get profile method. Now in a screen, how do we get the user ID that's in the parameters? All we need to do is say const glob is equal to use global search params. And then the user ID should be on that already. So let's just go ahead and grab the token there. We got the user ID. It's going to do a fetch. We should get the profile information. And then eventually under the avatar itself, we can just display that information. So let's go ahead and just try this out real quick. I don't know why it's breaking. Let me just go ahead and restart it. Oh, I totally forgot to add the plus API here. And that's causing this really obscure issue, because it's trying to load in like node code into the front end. I think that's my issue. Let me refresh this real quick. Nice. Okay, so now when I go to the profile, it should load the name of the user I clicked and display it. So I'm not sure why that's not being displayed right now. Is text even visible? Yet another bug we got to figure out. Let's debug this. I'm going to go ahead and just console log the profile information. Let's see if we're even getting that back. And it looks like we do. So we do get back the profile information. But when I try to render out this text to the screen, it just doesn't show up. So I wonder if maybe the text is just like not the right color. Let me make it white. And then I'll give it a style here and see if it shows up. Okay, I guess the text was black by default. I think at some point I should come back and make it work with light mode, honestly, but we're not going to focus on that right now. So now we have the text displayed. And I could probably put a little bit of gap. So I could say gap of 12 between the name, maybe even 24. And then I'll increase the size of this. I think I could say font size at 20. See how that looks? Okay, maybe 32. Oh, I'm putting on the wrong thing. 32. Okay, this looks pretty good. We could probably add a back button at the top left. Oh, I gotta say header title is nothing. And then that should hopefully look good. I'm curious if over here we can change the actual name of this. Yeah, I'm going to call this feed. So that it'll say back to feed when I go here instead of saying index, because I don't think that was really good. All right, let's try to keep building out the profile page. I'll come back and add an image here in a second, but I want to show all the posts that this user has created. So we're going to have to make another endpoint, which maybe we can make a users endpoint. I could say users. And then inside the users folder, I can make a new directory called user ID. And then inside of that directory, I can say posts.tsx. I'm trying to make it like kind of RESTful. So the endpoint would be like user/abc/posts, and that'll get all the posts related to a user. And oh, I'm putting this in the wrong location. Let me move this to the API. This is supposed to be an API endpoint. And I'm going to copy this, and I want to make sure I put plus API in the name so I don't make that mistake as I did last time. We should be able to copy this and then paste it over here. And now what we want to do is, again, get the user ID, but it needs to be from the second to last. So like I should probably say like parts is equal to this, and then we'll get the user ID from the second to last part. By the way, there's probably a library that does this much more efficiently than this little like splitting in this hacky approach, but I'm not going to worry about it just yet. Okay, so if we have the user ID from this parameter here, what we can do is then get all of the posts that are associated with that user ID. So let's just say const posts is equal to, and then we want to get all the posts, user posts, where the user ID is equal to the user ID we're passing in, and we can send that back. We don't need to get the profile because we already know what the username is, right? So we could just get back the posts. And now we have to go to the users file, and I'll go ahead and just add another method here called like get user posts. We can go ahead and take in a user ID, and this needs to return the post type. We'll say users of user ID posts. Same idea, do get request and just return that information. And then if we go back to the page that should be displaying these posts, we can do another query. So we'll go ahead and just use this, call that method, and hopefully we'll get all the post data back, which we can console log and make sure that this shows up. So looks like it's throwing some type of error. So let's make sure that we get back. Let me do a hard refresh. I'm not sure if maybe there's a bug there. Click it, and eventually we should get the post back. I'm not sure why it's crashing though. Yeah, I think it's actually crashing here. I think this user ID is not the correct one. Let me just go ahead and print out what the user ID is and see what we're trying to fetch. All right, it's saying user ID of posts. I think I need to go back to. That's probably our issue. And now we're getting back a bunch of post data, okay? And so we should be able to render out that post data. I could probably make another like function post component that takes in a post and it does some stuff. I think we can just display the text of the post and then like the time it was posted and then an image, but we don't have images yet. All right, let's just do this the old-fashioned way. I'm going to say post, and then we want to, inside that post, we're going to display the post text, and then probably also display the created at, which let's do it the right way. So let's go here and grab the distance now function, and I'll paste that in. And we'll go ahead and style that as well. So let's say like timestamp and import this one. So now we just need to loop over these posts. So I'll say post.map. This could be undefined, so we want this question mark. And then we'll just render out all the posts, and here they are. They look pretty bad. Okay, let's make these look a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and on this post, we'll make it a dark gray. We'll give it some padding for sure and some border radius. And then the text color for the actual text needs to be improved. So here, I'm not sure why it's black. Oh, I think, I'll just do that. Okay. And so we also need like a post text, I think. One thing I wish you could do is you can't actually like style the color on the parent. So like even though I'm putting color white on this post, it doesn't apply to the children. Like you have to manually do this, which is kind of a pain, but it is what it is. And then we could say font size of 16 to make it a little bit bigger, maybe 24. 22. Yeah, probably 22. And then, yeah, we could probably just add a little bit of gap between the text and the time. So we'd have to, on the post itself, I could say gap of 8. And then the time is so hard, I can't even read that. So like we should do like 16. There we go. So now I can view all the posts by this user, and I'd only have 4 of them. So let's just make a couple more. And it might be good to like test copying and pasting a few. Okay, I don't know why copy paste doesn't work. So let's just type some in, click post, and I'll go to that user's profile. And I can't scroll. I can't see this post. It's like barely visible. It's poking out down there. So we have to add this thing into some type of scrollable component. So how do we do that? We just do body scroll view, and we'll just go ahead and update down there too. And hopefully now we should be able to scroll on that and see all the posts of that user. So let's go here. Let's see. Scroll view child layout must be applied through the content container style prop. So I cannot apply this style here. Let's see how this looks like. I go here. The posts do show up, but they're looking pretty bad now. So I think what we're going to need to do is I could actually put this whole thing in its own little container, and I'll rename this to something else. Like this will be called header container. And then we'll come down here and just modify that. And then we will go ahead and just put some, I'm going to reduce the gap on this, and I'll probably just do some margin bottom on this whole thing. Margin bottom 24 to push it down. I don't know why there's such a huge amount of space when this thing loads up. Oh, it's because I have margin top 80 here on this header container. Okay, that makes sense. So now I go to it, looks pretty nice. I can scroll and see more. I'm going to add some gap between all these things. So all the post components, we should probably add a view and just say like post container. And then down here, we'll say post container right above the post. And just say some gap between these, maybe 12. Cool, so now we can scroll and see all the posts that this user made. I do think the post having a fixed height, probably not the best. I think this looks better. Adding might do 20. Okay. So yeah, now I think what I'm going to do is just add some follower count. So like we'll have like a component or a placeholder so we can do like a follower count here. So we'll say view, and then we want to say styles follower container. We'll just go down here and add this in. We'll do flex 1. Probably need to do some gap at some point. No, we'll add all that in. And then we're just going to go ahead and add in 3 views. I think we just want to keep track of like how many followers they have. Say 0 followers. So we'll add in these 0 posts, 0 followers, 0 following. Let's see if those show up. I don't know why they're not showing up. Oh, these probably need to be text, not views. And then the text is probably dark. So we'll say follower text. We'll come down here and add some follower text here. Make it white, make it a little bit larger. And there you have it. I think this whole thing should have some padding horizontal of 24 to bring those in. And then like we should have probably some margin bottom on this thing. Or even on the whole container. Yeah, I'll do margin bottom of like 24 to push that down. Font size could probably be a little larger. I think on the text itself, let's try like 18. 22. I think this looks pretty good, but all I want to do right now is I want to put the real amount of posts that you have. So I'm going to say posts.length. So we know they have 5 posts. 0 followers and 0 following. Okay. Yeah, this is a pretty good start to a profile page, I think. Let me just go ahead and commit this. I think we made some good progress, and I don't want to lose any of this progress. So I'm going to say ability to view a user's profile. And we'll go ahead and sync that up. Now, one thing I didn't like is when this page loaded up, it just looks bad, right? So I should probably add some skeleton loaders. So it's not just a bunch of like blank text. So this is the first time we've done skeleton loaders in this application. And the way you can do it is we could check to see if the posts are currently loading. So like we'll do a skeleton loader here for the posts. I'll say is loading. And then we will name it. We'll say post loading, okay? Now let's go down to where we render out these posts. So instead of mapping over these, we're going to say posts loading. And then if they are, we want to go ahead and just render out the map. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and show a skeleton. So there's a skeleton loader in this directory that we can bring in, which looks kind of like this. And to kind of force this to be true, let's just do this and see what it looks like. So that's what the skeleton loader looks like. Pretty cool looking. But we want to do a couple of them, right? So let's just add in a good amount. I think I have to use, do I have to use React fragments here? There we go. Let's just do React fragments. For some reason, you can't just do like empty brackets. Okay, so that's what the loading skeleton looks like. We just have to basically allow it to send in some styles to make it a little bit larger. So I'll say style, and I'll say styles.postSkeleton, and then we'll have to make one. So let's go down here, go ahead and add that in. And now we have like this placeholder. I think these are a little big. I'll do like 60. Maybe 80. Okay, maybe 100 was pretty good. Okay, so now when the page loads, it should show that. So that's how we can kind of simulate. So up here, I'm actually going to rename this to is posts loading. And then we can use that down here. Secondly, the name. The name should probably have a loader because it has to fetch that information dynamically, right? So I'm going to say is loading, and I'll say is profile loading. And where we have the display name, all we're going to do differently is if this is true, we will make a skeleton loader. Otherwise, we will show the display name. So let's go ahead and just set this to true for right now, and we can visualize it. And it's not displaying the skeleton. I think we might have to give this like another type of thing down here to give it some height. I'll say display name skeleton, and we'll just give it some height as well. And we'll attach that style here. Let's see if that shows up. Okay, so now it's showing up. You just need to style it a little bit bigger. I think we just need to style it a little bit better. I'll say 140, and the height will be 40. I might even say 180. 20? I don't know, I'll have to play around with it. Yeah, so this should be good. And now I'm going to actually replace that hard-coded true with the real loader. And now if I were to go back and just like do a hard refresh and click on, yeah, I need to plug my laptop in. But if I clicked on the profile now, you see those loaders for a second, and then boom, the data comes in. So I think that looks a lot nicer. So it's definitely good to have placeholders and skeleton loaders when your stuff is initially loading. It just gives it a nice, better look to it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just commit that. I'm gonna say adding skeleton loaders to profile page. I think the next thing I'm going to work on is the ability to follow other users. So we're going to first create a new user. We'll sign out of this one. And then we're going to sign up for a different email. I'll just say like testing@example.com. And we will just go ahead and put in a random password. We'll click sign up. And now we're logged in as a completely different user who should be able to view a profile of someone else. So I'm going to view the WebDev Cody profile, and I want to add a follow button. Maybe just underneath their name or something. So let's go to the profile page. Let's go here. And if we wanted a follow button or an unfollow button, how would we do that? Well, let's go ahead and find where we display the name, which is right here. And underneath this, might as well just add a button. We can make it a pressable. We'll say pressable, and then this could have some text in it that says follow. And we're going to go ahead and style this as well. So we'll say follow button, and then we'll go down here and just make this style. So underneath the display name, we could say app button, I think is the component that we created. And we should just go ahead and import this. Let's see. Oh, when you press it, we need to do something. So if you press the follow button, it should hit an API endpoint and make your currently logged in user follow this user. Okay, so let's start with that. We're going to go ahead and make a follow API endpoint, and then we'll like hook in to do a post request to that. So in the API, let's just make a followers endpoint. You want to try to make this RESTful, and then we'll do like an index.tsx. And we're going to go ahead and just make a function here. So async function post. And this is going to actually be, let me do this. I'll say export const post is equal to with auth. just like we do for the other API endpoints. But the difference here, make sure you add the plus API here. I keep forgetting to do that. So plus API will tell Expo that this is an API route handler. All right, and so what we need to do is the current user who's trying to follow someone else, in the request, there should be some JSON that tells us like the user ID that we want to follow. So I'll say like const toFollow is going to be equal to request.json. I think we need to await on that. Okay, so we're going to assume that the user doing the post sends in a toFollow user ID, and then we should make sure that's defined. And then we'll have to go and like create a record in a database somewhere. Right now we don't have a followers table. Let's go to our schema and I'll make one called followers. Go down here. Let's go down here, say export const followers, and we'll make a table. And this is going to link one user ID to another user ID. And we can go ahead and just add some indexes here so we can like quickly find those. I might actually rename this to be user ID instead of follower ID. Just like that. Okay. That should hopefully be good. So I think all we need to do here is basically create an entry. So we're going to insert a follower entry into that followers table. So I can just go ahead and just say, insert this into the followers table, where the user ID will match the user ID that's logged in, and then the follow ID will be that toFollowers ID. Just go ahead and return the information about the follower information. I think I might just do this. So now we need to run our schema. So I'll do a bun run db generate, and that should generate a migration script to add that followers table. And then I will run it. So db migrate. Okay, that should be good. Keep in mind, this is just warnings. These are notices. This isn't like an error or anything. Okay, so this should allow us to follow somebody. If we go back over here, we need to actually invoke that API endpoint when a user clicks on this button. So we're going to have to make an API over here, like a method called followers.tsx. And then we'll copy one of these approaches. I'll say follow user. This will take in a toFollow user ID, and that's going to call our followers endpoint with a post. It's going to pass in that toFollower user ID, or toFollow user ID. And this thing should return a follower. So let's go back to the schema, and we're going to go down to the bottom and just export that follower type. And then we can simply just, I think we just do this. And then on the API, I mean, we might as well just type this. Say export type follower user response, and this will just be a follower like this, which we can use to import over here. So here we'll just import this one instead of that other one, and then we can call this. So follow user is going to need to be called here. So what we could do is I'm going to do a mutation. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring in a mutation, which should call that follow user method. Let me go ahead and change the name of that so we don't have that error. And then we'll import that follow user method we just added. And what is this one complaining about? Is pending. Okay. So now we can call this mutation. We'll just invoke it right here. Okay. And I don't need to pass this anything because like the user ID is already grabbed from that global search params, right? So if I click on this, it should hopefully show an activity indicator if it's pending. So is following loading. Let's just go ahead and add that inside the button itself and import that. Okay, so now we should be able to test this out. If I go back and click on his profile and click on follow, we see a little loading indicator. It's spun there. It's kind of hard to see. I probably need to make the styling of that a little bit better. And also we should probably disable the button if this thing is loading. So we need to go here and just add a disabled property. And then probably, if you can put it on pressable, I don't know if you can do this. Can you? Yeah, you can do that. Okay, so now the button will be disabled when it's currently loading. And then other than that, I mean, like we should probably make the styles of this thing I wonder if we can get this like a flex. Let me just center the items here because I think it didn't really show the indicator too well. And then for the indicator, I think we can give this a style, or maybe it's a color. Yeah, we give it a color is white. Let's see what this does. So I'm going to click it again, and you'll see the indicator pop up. I might need to add a little bit of gap to the button. And also the button is not getting disabled, so I'll have to fix that. So let's go back to the app button. I'm going to say gap on the button itself. I think I actually put this on the wrong thing. Let me try to put this here, and I'll say gap of 2. And let's see if that fixes it. A little bit better, but still it's like not disabling the button. So I think to make it disabled, we'd actually have to like do another type of style here called like disabled. And then we just have to change the background color. And I think we could probably add it in here if the thing is currently disabled. A little hard to see. Let me make it all A's. And it's also really fast because it's hitting a locally running database. But if you want to visualize that, we could just go ahead and await new promise and then just wait for a second inside this API endpoint. So when I click it, it'll take a little bit of time, but eventually it'll finish. And then we can kind of style this button a little bit better. I kind of wonder if this thing will look better without any text. I think I could probably just say like is loading, and then we could just toggle between having that text versus having the loading indicator directly on this button. And then where we use this, and then where we actually use this button, I could just say is loading and then get rid of that. So now this button can have like a loading state. Okay, this looks a lot better. I think this is much better. Awesome. So we have created hopefully a bunch of entries here. So if I go to the followers table, we have a bunch of entries. This is not the best. We should probably add a check to make sure you don't like follow the same person twice. So let's go back to our API. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to say get the current follower. And what we're going to do is I'm going to say get following, and then we're going to get the first one that we can find by ID. So let's do an and here. Let's import that. So get the following record where the user ID matches the one that we're logged in as, and get the one that we're trying to follow to see if it already exists. Because if it does, we don't want to create the same record multiple times. Okay, so now I can go ahead and delete all this. Click refresh, and then I should be able to click it once, and then that'll create the record, and click it again. It shouldn't do anything. So now I'm capped out at 1. Okay, so let's do the inverse. I want to be able to unfollow somebody. Now to keep this simple, I'm just going to also pass in like an unfollow boolean here. That's optional, and we're going to just toggle the logic based on this. So if it's an unfollow versus if it's a follow, I'm going to move all this logic here. You know, I could probably make a separate API endpoint to do that, but I'm just going to do it all in one. Why not? And the difference is if you are doing an unfollow, basically you need to just delete the follow record. So I think I can say await db delete where those criteria match. And then we can just go ahead and return that. And then I think I can just do this. Okay, so now the idea is you could pass in this unfollow true if you want to the endpoint, and then it should delete. But we don't have a way to test this out because we don't switch the button to a different state based on if we're following or unfollowing someone. So I think we're going to have to also fetch some more information about the current profile that we're looking at. So I think we could just add another endpoint that we can fetch to get the Boolean to know if we're currently following this profile or not. So let's go here, and I'm going to make another endpoint. Instead, it's going to be a get request. So we'll do this with a get. And we want to pass the user ID in like a query string. I don't really know how to do that. Let's see. Get user ID passed in query string. Okay, so that will convert this to a URL object, and then we get the search parameters of user ID. And then we just want to figure out if the user with that user ID is currently being followed by the user we're logged in as. So we can go ahead and just get a find first where I think we also need to do the and. So I'm going to grab all this and I will just paste that in. And instead of to follow user ID, we're going to say user ID. And this could be following. And we're going to go ahead and just return the first entry that we find. So this will either be defined or it won't be defined. And if it's defined, we can just go ahead and toggle the button to be something else. I'm just double checking this logic. I think it should be good. All right, same idea. Let's go to this API method, and we're going to add one. And then we're going to add another method here. I'll say get following. And this will take in a token and a user ID. And it just needs to call that same type of thing. So it's going to do an API request to followers with a question mark user ID is equal to this. And it's going to try to figure out if we are currently following that person or not. And this could potentially be undefined, so we're going to go ahead and add that in. All right, so now going back to here, we need to do a query to know if we're following this person. Let's grab this, and we will say, is following loading? Following. Use query could be following of a user ID. We're going to go ahead and call get following. We have two naming collisions. I'm going to change that to is follow loading. And we're going to use that here. And so what we're going to do is if this whole thing is still loading, if following loading, we don't even want to show this button yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll show a skeleton. Otherwise, we're going to show this app button like this. Okay, so if I go ahead and like refresh this page and then navigate to it, we should see a loader for that button. And then eventually it should load for us if it didn't crash. I think the endpoint crashed on us. It said JWT malformed. I'm not sure why I did that. Let's figure out what's going on there. I think one of the issues is that this token is like refetched every single time I navigate to new pages, which probably isn't what we want. We probably want to use a provider and wrap our main layout, kind of like we do here. So we could probably add like an auth provider, and we'll just go ahead and pretend like we have that written. And then in here, we'll say export function auth provider, and that could just return a context. So we got to make a auth context and create it like this. And then instead of using this state here, I think we can just actually bring in the state using that context here. Oh, we should probably also do the setters. I'll add the setters here. I'll add them here. All right, so this shouldn't like keep on remounting and refetching every time. The token should be defined. And so what that will allow us to do is everywhere in our app where we're calling that use effect, I believe it's going to only load the token once, right? So it's going to try to fetch the token, and if it's stored in local storage or whatever, the secure storage, and then it should set it. But we'll try it out. Let's just go ahead and click on this, and it doesn't seem like it's failing anymore. It's kind of hard to tell if it's working because it's so fast. So we could also just go in here and say like await new promise and just add a fake timer and see if it loads correctly. Oh, you know what? The issue is actually because I did the token and user ID backwards. I think that's the issue. We might have not even needed to do all this whole like provider context stuff, but I think that makes the code better because now it's not like doing another fetch every single time to get the token. But whatever, let's move forward. So basically, if you're already following this user, all we need to do is just switch between a certain type of button. So like if we are currently following this user, we can switch it to unfollow. And then we could also change the mutation method. Remember, we have that like Boolean called like following, and then we'll just go ahead and set it to true or false based on if we're currently following the user, which means we just need to go up here and we have to like type this with the Boolean. And this needs to have the Boolean passed in into the body. And I think we should be good after that. All right, let's test this out. If I click on this thing, oh, you know, I think it's called a unfollow. I think that's what it needs to be called, not following. Unfollow. So if we're currently following, this should be true. Otherwise, it should be false. Let's try this out. And I don't think it's going to refresh this because we'll have to like invalidate this cache here. So after we run this, we should probably, where do we call this? Yeah, over here, we should probably say .then. And then we should invalidate the following cache, which means we have to bring in the query client. So let's go up here, bring in the query client like that, and then import it. Actually, I don't think we can run it here. I think we have to run it here probably. Okay, on success. And then we can run it here. So after we've successfully followed or unfollowed somebody, we just refetch the following information from the database, and that should hopefully change the button. All right, but for some reason it's still not working. So let's go here and just like console log out what's going on here, because this thing should have worked. Let's just print out unfollow and see what we're getting. So if I click unfollow, it's sending in undefined for some reason. So I think we got a little bug. Let's figure this out. This is calling with the token, the user ID, and unfollow. Token, user ID, and unfollow. That's the issue, I think. Click it again. Okay, it's at least crashing this time. So let's go back and try to figure out what's going on here. Value is not JSON serializable. I think the issue is that this thing is not a JSON serializable format. We check out the database, it did delete it from the database. I just think that maybe instead of this, we could just say undefined, like just return nothing. And then I'm going to refresh and see if it shows now. Let's just add a console log. I'm not really sure if this is just like printing undefined or something, but for some reason, if you're not actually following the person, it like crashes. Let's go here and we'll look at what gets printed out. It prints out undefined. Honestly, we're not really even using this on the front end. Like I might as well just say like, wrap this in curly braces. I think it's complaining about this not being an object. I think, because it's like saying it's not serializable. I'm not sure why, because it is undefined, which is serializable from what I understand. But yeah, maybe that's all we need to do. So if we click on unfollow, it's supposed to call this endpoint. Let's look at this code again. And this is saying value is not serializable once again. So I'll just go ahead and wrap these in curly braces. I'm guessing this is somewhat related to the issue. Let me go ahead and fix this one too. That one's not working. Let's see if this works now. Okay, so at least it's printing out true now. I think the backend endpoints aren't necessarily failing. Let's pause for a second and rethink what we're doing, because I think I'm just getting confused. So this endpoint, honestly, like we just need it to return true and false. So let's try this again. We want this after you do the GET request. If this is true, we'll just force it to be true or false. I think that might be a better approach. The backend just can return true or false, and that's it. Okay, there we go. Seems like that's working. And the only thing that I want to change is when it's an unfollow, we want to change the styling of this a little bit. So if we're following, we can do a follow button. Otherwise, we'll say styles unfollow button. And then we'll go down here and we'll just add those two things. I'm going to change this to follow button instead of following button. And if we're following, this should be the unfollow. So this is backwards. Let me just refresh. I don't know why that's not applying those styles. Okay, so follow and then unfollow. And then we could probably add some system icons to this if we wanted to. I don't like the green in the red, so I'm going to go ahead and just make the unfollow one be kind of a gray. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And then we could just show a follow or unfollow icon. So if I just add an icon symbol here, and then the last thing I want to do is I want to add a little icon to this after. I'm going to go ahead and just put an icon symbol, and I'll say following. We can do this AC thing, which I'll go ahead and import this. Import star as AC from the app colors. Actually, I think it's called something else. It's called Let me see where I'm doing that. I'll just copy this line. Okay. And then down here where we have that button, let's see if this shows up something. So follow, unfollow. I don't know why it's using check marks. Do we have like a better list of icons we can use? I think there's like a person fill plus and a minus. Let's try that. Awesome. And then instead of system green, we'll say system, I'll say light text. It looks pretty good. Just need to style this to make it look a little better. Okay, I don't like how the icon is like not centered. I think the app button, we should probably fix the styling here. So here we do the button styles. Okay, I can't figure out how to get this thing vertically centered. Like it just looks bad. I'm gonna try to just remove this real quick. And I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna try to put this in a React fragment and see if this fixes it. And then I'll just hard code it to B minus. I decided to go off camera for a second and just figure this out. Basically, I had to wrap this in a view. The text needs to be the children and the icon needs to be this. And so I wonder if maybe instead we could have like an icon that's passed in. I'll say icon, and this will actually be like a React node. And then we are going to display the icon here, like this, if it's defined. And then we'll make sure that we import it here. And then on the button itself, we could just say icon is equal to, and then we'll pass in that icon symbol. Let's try this. Unfollow, and then I can follow it. Unfollow, and then I can follow. Okay. Finally, I think this is working good. Now, the whole reason we did this is so that we can follow users. And when you follow a user, that should not only allow you to like have your feed be more curated towards who you are following, what they post, but also we can get notifications for when the people we follow were to post things. I'm going to go ahead and just commit what we have. I'll just say ability to follow others. And I'll just go ahead and commit this. So I think we want to fill in these zeros with real values to be able to get how many people this profile is following and how many people follow this profile. I think we need to modify this get profile method, because right now this is calling profiles of user ID. So if we look at profiles and go to user ID, this is trying to get the profile based on the user ID that's in the URL. Okay. So I think we just also need to say const following count, and we can say await db select, and then we're going to just grab all of the counts from the followers table to figure out how many people that they are following. But then also we're going to figure out how many people follow them by doing yet another query to get the followers count. And I think we could just kind of throw those in to the JSON response. So like, let's just go ahead and do an export type. And this would be a profile with the followers count and the following count. Okay, and then we'll go back to the profilers API, and then we want to make sure that this thing actually has the right profile response. And hopefully now in the UI, this thing should have a count attached to it. So instead of hard coding 0, which we're doing here, I could say profile dot followers count, and then this would be following count. To test this out, it says this web dev Cody profile has 1 follower, and if I unfollow it, it should have refreshed this for us. So I think we're going to have to like tell it to also force invalidate a different thing here, probably the profile. So now when I follow, it'll just go ahead and update that. Then when I unfollow it, update that as well. And then let's make sure that the following's working. So if I go back to my feed and I click on my new account, which we haven't updated the name of, it's called Regulatory Night, it has one following. Pretty good. We shouldn't be able to follow ourselves, but we're not going to worry about that just now. I'm going to go ahead and commit this. I'm going to say add following count display. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to work on the notifications. Right now, this thing is just not really implemented at all. And the way we can do notifications is when you follow somebody, if that person in the future were to post something new, or if they were to follow you back, maybe we could make a notification for that. So we're going to go back to our schema, and I'll make another table called notifications. And that is going to allow a user to post something. So like this will have a notification type, and then it'll have a user ID of who the notification belongs to. And then we probably also want to track who created the notification. I'll just say from user ID, so we can track something at least. And there's different ways you can do notifications. You could do them like when we hit the notification modal, like you could fetch them and run queries in the background. But the approach I'm going to take is kind of like we're going to create entries every time a user does an action so that we don't have to keep on doing a bunch of queries in our backend to get the data. Because that could be a lot of queries as people keep on trying to fetch their notifications. So let's just go ahead and add some indexes there that we can actually get based on a user ID or from user ID. And that should be good. Let's just go ahead and generate a migration script. So generate, migrate. That should be good. And let's work on the first notification where if someone were to follow you, like we just add the ability to follow, we should probably add in a notification that gets created when you follow somebody. So how do we do that? Let's go to followers, and then over here where we did the post, and anytime you follow somebody, which is this logic, we just need to create a notification and attach it to the user we're trying to follow. So let's just go ahead and insert a record into our notifications table. And the user ID is going to be the toFollow user ID. And then the from user ID is going to be the currently logged in user. And then the type will be a follow. And now that I think about it, maybe even having content as well. Let me go back to the schema. I might just make this really simple and just say like content. And this could be some arbitrary text that you can put into the notification. So I will have to rerun the generate and then the migrate one more time. But this will allow us to go over here and say content, and it says user profile followed you. Now, do we actually have the profile? I don't think we have the profile. So we're going to have to get the profile of the user who's logged in like this. And this will be the user.id. And this thing should be defined. If it's not defined, then like that's a main issue. But now that we have the profile of who did the action, I think I can say profile.displayName followed you. Okay, and this is going to be simple. Like we're not going to have like the ability to click on the notification and like deep link to their profile. Like we want to keep this pretty simple. But yeah, now that we have that added, the moment you follow somebody, it should create a notification for that person. So like, for example, if I go to WebDevCody and I unfollow and then follow them, and then if I logged in as WebDevCody, I should see that notification pop up. And then I can also just refresh this and we'll see a new table called notifications. And we see an entry here that's for that WebDevCody user from the other user account. It's a follow type of notification. And then it says Regulatory Night followed you. So we're just going to keep this as simple as possible, but let's try to at least get this displayed out to the other user. So I'm going to log out and log back in as the other one. And now I notice that I totally messed up these buttons. So I think we did some styling here with these app buttons, and I think I messed it up. I think because I added the flex in the center here, that should fix it. Yeah, that's good. So let's sign in as webdevcody@gmail.com. And then I'm going to go to my own notifications tab. And now we want to fetch all the notifications that belong to me. Right now, we don't have a way to do that. So we first of all need to add in an API endpoint to get all the notifications that belong to me. So let's make a notifications plus API, and then we're going to do a GET request. See if I can just copy something we already have. Go ahead and import notifications. And then for here, I'll say user notifications. And we'll just go ahead and update some of this stuff so we can get it. So get all the notifications that belong to our currently authenticated user. And then we want to return those. And they're going to limit by 20. Let's see, with profile columns, display name of true. I don't think we want this width. I'm going to get rid of the width right now. Okay, so now we could add another method called notifications. And we're going to follow the GET request that we're doing here. So you get notifications. And that should just get all the notifications that belong to me. Oh, we should probably go back to the schema and add in a notification type so we can use that. And this would be a type that we should probably export here. So export type notification response like this. It's going to be an array of notifications. We'll go back to the API and then we just want to use this. And that should hopefully return all the notifications for us. And now when the notifications page is open, let's try to figure out where that is. Over here, notifications. So let's just do a query. So how do we do a query for notifications? We say const data notifications. We do a use query. And then we can get all the notifications for our own user like this. We're going to have to get the token again, which we know how to do. Let's grab this, get the token. And now we just want to render out those notifications. Right now, I don't think we have a good way to style it. And now we just want to render those out. So let's say notifications map and just render out some text for right now, just to make sure that this is working. I'm curious why this is, I think this is the wrong type. I think I've typed something wrong here. Yeah, this is not the right type. Let me import that. Okay, so now it should be the right type. Okay, so we can do ID here. All right, let's test this out. Let's click on notifications and we should see regulatory night followed you. Cool, so this is a step in the right direction. Let's just clean this up a little bit. I think I'm going to add a close button or a back button, kind of similar to how we did it in the other page. So let's find out where we do the tabs. I think it's this one. And this could be a close. So let's find notifications. I'm going to add this. I'm going to get rid of that. I'll say close. And now it's a matter of styling the notifications a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and make some styles like this. And then we're going to add the styles to here. In fact, I think this should be a body view scroll. And we might not even need styles. Let's just try this. You know, I changed my mind. Let's go back and add in a title here. I'll just say notifications. So now the first thing we should do is style these. So I'm going to go ahead and just say styles notification container. And then we'll just make that look styled kind of similar to how we did some other stuff. I guess this works as well. We could just do a little bit of that. The text font size should probably be a little larger. Do like a 20. And then we probably want to put like a little icon here. So we know how to do a system icon. I think we could just do a view. And then we could say, I've already forgotten what the component is for the icons. I think we can go to the profile and find that icon stuff. It's called an icon symbol. So we're going to go and add the icon symbol here and just make sure we import some of the stuff. And based on the type, I could say if type of notification is equal to follow, we can show a badge plus. Otherwise, we'll show something else. Let's see how this looks at the very least. So open it up. There it is. And we need to give this the actual like notification container. And this needs to be the notification text. We don't need to put a key on there anymore. So we'll add the text here. And the container needs to be a flex. Like that. Okay. Add a little bit more padding. And this is looking pretty decent, I think. Now it's just a matter of like, can we get some more stuff displayed here? So like if I were to be following a regulatory night, which we could probably have it so when you click on regulatory night, it takes you to the user who did that. And we have the user ID. So like we can make this instead, this could be a pressable. We'll make it a pressable like this. And we'll go ahead and bring in the router. So const router is equal to use router. Import that. And we want to go to the profile from the user who did this. We'll probably make this a little different coloring so it's like obvious that this is clickable. We have like a blue. Maybe that's fine. So now if I click it, it's supposed to take me to their profile. Not really sure why that's not working. I want to make sure that this is the actual correct ID. So let's render this out. A notification from user ID. Make sure this is defined. Okay, it is defined. Let's just do a hard refresh. Maybe there's a bug there. I'm going to click it, and it's just not taking me to their profile. How do we do it on the dashboard? Let's go to the index, and we went to dashboard, profile, post, user ID. Yeah, at this point, I'm not sure. Let's just add a console log here and just say like pressed. Make sure that this is getting invoked. Okay, so it is getting invoked, but like this thing is just not going away. So let me do a router.back. Maybe that'll close it and then it'll redirect us to there. There we go. I think you have to do a router back first. Cool, so now I can actually just like follow that person when they notified me. A little error there, but let's just go ahead and hide that so you guys don't know about it. Okay. And yeah, this is looking pretty good. So now we can click on people, view their profile. We can see our notifications. We can go back to our feed and modify our settings. So one more type of notification we should add in is just a post. So like if someone you're following posts something, maybe we should display like a little snippet of what they posted, and then you click it and it takes them to their profile as well. We don't really have a post page, but at some point, like we can't just add every feature into this video. Otherwise, I'd be rebuilding like Twitter or rebuilding Blue Sky, right? So I'm trying to build just enough so you guys can understand how to build your own and build upon what I've done. Think of this as like a giant prototype, a good starting point for you guys to learn from and make something better. Okay, so when we create a post, think over here, we can go to posts, and then when we create a post, I think what we need to do is get everyone who's following us. So I'll say const followers is equal to, and we can fetch all of the followers by the current user ID we're logged in as. Yeah, I think I'm going to do following ID. And then for every single one, we can create a new notification saying that a new post was created. And we could probably also get the profile of this user. So let's go up here. I think we have to say, I think we can say const profile and just get the profile from the current user we're logged in as. So that we can say profile.display name posted something new and interesting. Instead of saying posted a new post, I'm actually going to say posted, and then we'll just say text. Probably do some substring. Probably append a ... at the end, just so it's like apparent that this is in a continuation. And we'll go ahead and import the notifications there. Okay, so this is going to be a slow way to do it. I think I'm going to say await promise all. And we can just go ahead and refactor this to do a map. So it's going to be a lot faster to create all those notifications in one go. Yeah, so this should be pretty good. Let's test this out. If I go and post something, what is up? And then click post. Let's go and log in as the other one. I'm not sure why logging out doesn't actually like kick us out anymore. We'll probably have to fix that bug. Let's log in as testing@example.com, and then we will just go ahead and look at our notifications and check, did we get one from WebDevCody? And it says that we did, which is good. Posted what is up. If I click it, it takes me to his account, and I can view what is up at the bottom. Now this, we should fix this. This is supposed to be ordered the other way. So I think if we go to users, user ID posts, I think we just need to order this. Hey, it's like it's reading my voice as I'm coding. So now if I refresh this, I'll give it a limit too. When I refresh this, I should be able to click on his account and see the latest at the top. Okay, this is better. Now, another thing I don't like is this text is like going off the page, right? This is not the best. We should probably find a way to wrap this. Let me try more padding and see if that like fixes it. Okay, there is just, yeah, I need to add more padding to the right. Padding right 32 or something. So it can like wrap. Awesome. So now we know when we follow people and they post something, we can click on them and just view the latest stuff at the top. We can also see who followed us, which is pretty cool. We can see our feed. Let's just go ahead and commit this, and I'll just say adding notifications. Now I do want to fix this bug with sign out. I think I have to say router dot back and then router dot push to go to the home page. I'll be honest, I'm still trying to understand the Expo router. There's something I'm not really understanding it with the stacks, but I feel like a stack needs to be dismissed first before you can just like try to redirect to a new page. So I think if I do it now, it should close it. And I thought it would have taken me back to the home page, but it didn't. Maybe it needs to be a replace. So I actually want to fix the issue with logout. So like right now when you click sign out, it doesn't seem like it takes you to the right page. And I think it's because this is supposed to be a promise. So we should probably wait on this thing to be like fully deleted before we redirect to a new page. So let's try it again. Okay, I think that fixed it. I'm gonna just test this real quick one more time. Okay, let's click sign out. I think maybe we have to clear out like the token as well. Let's go back to the index here. Is logged in. This is probably just forcing us back to the dashboard. I might restructure this app just a little bit. Instead of like checking if you're logged in or not already, I'm going to go ahead. I'm actually just going to show a different button. So like if we're currently loading, I'm going to show the activity indicator. Let me just log out real quick. And otherwise, we're going to show the login button. So if we're loading, show the activity indicator. Otherwise, we'll say is logged in. We'll show those. All right, sorry, I refactored this real quick. Basically, when the page is loading, we're going to show a loading indicator right here for the buttons. But if you're logged in, I'm going to show a go to dashboard button. Otherwise, I'm going to show login and sign up. Let's just go refresh and see what happens. So you'll see a quick little loading indicator. We are not actually logged in yet, so let's sign in. Web dev Cody. Sign in, and then I'm going to make sure I can sign out. So I'm going to go ahead and click sign out, and that takes me back to the sign in page. I think that's working now. I don't think I actually need the promise there. I like this better because now if you're signed in, and I just do a hard refresh, it should say go to dashboard. Obviously, that's probably not the final approach you want to do in an app. You probably just want to force them to go to whatever, but I didn't want to try to figure out the proper way to like get all that redirecting working. All right, so one of the final things I want to add to this application is the ability to upload images, not only in the post, but also like the profile picture. It's kind of bad that it's just like a blank white circle. So when you go to the settings page, I want to add in a section where you can change your profile picture. So let's go to account. And let's add a circle at the top of your settings, similar to the profile page, where they can click it. It'll be like a pressable avatar, and then that's going to prompt them to change their image. And we'll have to be able to upload the image somewhere. In this case, we're going to be using S3. So we'll upload the image to S3, and then we should be able to display that image for the user. Let's grab this avatar view, and I'm going to put it in the account. I think we could probably just put it here, maybe. Then we'll go down here and just add avatar. And we probably want to center it as well. So let's just go ahead and center this. Go down here. That looks pretty good. I wonder if I actually added this to a stack. if this would make it look a little better. I'm going to go ahead and just put a stack here and add it here. And then we could add a pressable. So let's just do upload avatar or change, modify. Yeah, upload avatar should be good, or I could do like change avatar. Maybe even change profile picture or something like that. And then we could probably add, yeah, I think this looks pretty good. So now what we need to do is if a user clicks on this, we want to load up a built-in way to change and upload images. So on this text, we can say on press, and I'll say handle change picture. By this, and I'll say function handle change picture. And the way we can kind of change a picture here is we're going to say const result is equal to await image picker. And we're going to bring in a third-party library that lets us basically change images. So I'm going to say bun add Expo image picker like this. That should get downloaded, and then I'm going to import it in this component. And then we can simply say dot launch image library async. And we want to be able to pick images. And I think this should be good. I don't know why this is deprecated. I'll have to go figure out like the proper way to do it. But if the result is not canceled, then we can go ahead and set the image that they picked. So we're going to add some state here to keep track of the image like this. And all this is going to be is a URI. And this will just be a string like this. And I think what we could do is we're going to go down here. The const selected image is equal to result asset of 0 URI. And we're going to set that image. And that should be all we need to do. Let me go ahead and restart this. I think this is crashing because we installed a new library. Test this out, go to settings. I'm going to click on this. And it's going to load up this image library. And of course, this is on the simulator. So like you can actually access more images if you wanted to. But now we can actually select one of these images, and the idea is that we want to display that image after they kind of edit it. And I want to show that right here. So we're going to have to figure out how to basically take that image and display it. And the way we can do that is inside of here where we do the avatar. I think we could probably just like display the image if it's defined. Let me just go ahead and delete some of this stuff. Let's import image. Make sure we import image from React Native. I'll do image over here. Okay, let's test this out. Let's go to settings, and we are going to change the profile picture. I'll select the waterfall. And it's not yet displaying. I wonder if maybe the image is not. It looks like it's set up. I think it's just a styling thing. I probably need to instead like do this. Go down here and say avatar image. Okay, there we go. I just had to give like a width and a height. So now I can actually change my avatar image like this. And that'll change it. And then we want to actually upload this somewhere, right? Right now it's just locally. But when you change your image, we want to upload it to like an S3 bucket so that users can later download it and view it. So this is where we're going to bring in S3. And if you haven't used AWS, this is where it's going to get a little bit confusing. If you're not already confused watching my tutorial, I'm going to make a Docker file and I'm going to paste in some existing code I have. We're going to use this for spinning up a locally running S3 bucket. Okay. And then in our Docker compose file, I'm going to go ahead and paste in an S3 bucket. I'll call it like get social bucket. And basically this is going to run a command to then use some information about an S3 folder. So I'm going to make an S3 folder here. And we're going to add in an error page and an index page. These aren't really important. These are just needed for the locally running S3 thing to work. And then finally, I have an S3 MJS file that I'm going to paste in here. And we'll call this get social. And then we also need a cores XML to configure the bucket. Okay, so basically all this stuff is just so we can have a nice running bucket locally. There's other ways you can get locally running S3 buckets. This is just the approach I've been using for a while. Probably not the best approach, but it works. Let's do a Docker compose up, and that's going to rerun our database, and also it's going to build that Docker file that we just pasted in, which is going to like set up a simple Linux machine with Node 18. Going to install the AWS CLI, and then it should be able to be used to run our S3 service. Oh, and then finally, I need to do a bun add for S3 server. This is like a library you can use to just run the locally running S3 thing. And you'll see it made a folder over here called Get Social, and this is where all of your local S3 files will be put into. You're welcome to dive through this code if you want to like really understand it, but I find it very boilerplatey, so I don't think it's too important to like talk about. So now we need to actually store the image into the bucket. So after we have set the image here, we have the URI, and what we could do is basically call a method to try to upload the image to the S3 bucket. So the first thing I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go ahead and just make an API called storage, ESX, and I'm going to say export async function upload file, and this is going to take in a key and then a file like this. Now, in order to get this working, we have to first try to create a pre-signed URL. So we're going to have to call an API endpoint on our route to generate a pre-signed post. And I'll walk you through that process in a second. I'm just going to say const pre-signed post is equal to await get pre-signed post URL. And we'll pass in the key, and then we'll also pass in the content type like this. And now once we have the pre-signed post, honestly, I'm just going to paste some code in because this is so boilerplatey. Basically, this will have some fields on it, and you want to make a new form data object where you loop over all the fields and you push them into the form data. And then finally you append your file. So like when they select an image, this will be what it's going to append to this form. And then we have to do a fetch request and post that somewhere. So in our case, it's going to post it to the S3 bucket with the data, and then we should get back a response if everything worked well. So for this get pre-signed post URL, this has to be an actual like API endpoint. Okay, so we're going to have to first call an endpoint. So let's go and make an API endpoint over here. And I'll just call this pre-signed post plus API TSX. And then I'm going to paste in some code that I have, and I'll kind of walk you through how this works. Bring in some of this code as well. I got some Amazon code already set up, and I'll kind of explain how this works. All right, to get this working, there's a couple things we need to install. So the first thing is we need to install this AWS SDK client S3. So I'm going to add that. We also need this pre-signed post library, so I'm going to add that. And we also need a UUID library. So let's add all three of those. Probably just restart TypeScript real quick. And then I have a flag here that we can add over here to basically tell our app if we're going to be trying to connect to this local S3 bucket or if we're trying to connect to the real bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and just set that to true. And then we should also have a storage bucket, which I think we're calling ours get social. So I'll add that to the .env sample. All right. And what else do we need? So the way this works is we have this S3 client, which is going to initialize when we spin up our API. And that's going to connect to our locally running bucket with these access keys. This is just some random key ID that I used. I think the server thing needs like this key when you're running locally. I could be wrong though. But anyway, we use this to call a method called create pre-signed post. You pass it that client, and then you tell it what your storage bucket name is going to be. And then you also give it the ID, which in our case, we're just going to generate a random ID for our user trying to upload the image. And you can specify a max size of your image. So like we said, 5 megabytes. You can specify that it has to be an image type. So you don't want people to upload PDFs or anything like that. And then you can also give an expiration time. So like the way these pre-signed URLs work is you have 5 minutes or whatever you put here, like 60 seconds, for a user to actually upload the image to the bucket. And then finally, you're just going to return back the URL in the fields to the user. I think node environment we should probably set to development as well. Okay, so again, you'll see here localhost 9000 get social. This is the same bucket name. In fact, I think I should interpolate that. There we go. Now, so let's step back and try to understand what we're doing here. So remember, we want to call that upload file method that we talked about. And that should really give you back a file ID that we can later use to like update our profile. So let's make sure we pass in the selected file. I think I actually need to get rid of the key here. Like we don't need the key. Okay. And then to get the pre-signed post, we actually could instead just await a fetch here. I could do slash, hit that pre-signed post URL, and that should give us back the URL in the fields, I believe. So we could just go ahead and say URL in fields. I think I need to modify this a little bit. I think instead of appending the file like this, I could append it like this, and this will be the file name. And this we could say fields, this could be a string, and then this will just be URL. So let's just test this out. So I'm going to console log the file ID, and if this thing works, it should print out a random UUID that we can store on our settings or our profile page, and then also we should see a file get added to this Get Social folder here. So let's try this out. It probably won't work first try. We'll be lucky if it does. Let's click on Change Profile Picture. We'll click this. We'll click Choose. And let's see what happens. So it's not able to resolve this. I wonder if I need to just do a hard reset. I don't think I've restarted my server since installing those dependencies. Let's try it again. Do the flowers. And so we run into a strange little error about Babel. We can go ahead and just make a Babel config.js file. And if we just go ahead and add in this is telling Expo, like when you compile the code, make sure you include a certain preset. And I think we also need to install this preset. So if I go and look at my package.json, I think I just need to bun add this. So let's give that a try. Okay, so no errors, that's good, but I don't think it uploaded an image anywhere. So we're gonna have to figure out what happened there. So let's read through this code real quick. So we launched this, we should get a result back. We should have called upload image, and then we saw in the console that it is in fact calling our pre-signed post URL. So that is getting fetched here. It's doing a post request. I think I forgot to add my tokens and my headers and stuff. So I should probably do headers, authorization. We're probably taking a token up here like we do in all the other ones. So like where we call upload file, this should take in a token. I'm guessing that was the issue. It probably didn't have a token, so it never actually worked. Let's click on this and see if it then put the file in our bucket here. Okay, still not working. Let me just print out if we're getting here. So like let's print out what URL in fields is. And then I will do this one more time. I'm also going to print out here on the API. Okay, that actually worked. I had to like force close this whole app out to get it to work. But yeah, so now the image is actually uploaded to our folder over here, which represents a real like S3 bucket, but just running locally. And so now it's a matter of just displaying the remote URL instead of that local image. So some more things I'm going to do is I'm going to return the ID here in this response so that we can use it in the front end. So I think over here, this should have the key, and then later we could just return the ID. Okay, so like that's going to give us the unique ID for this file. And then over here, this would be the file ID, and all we could do is call another method to update the profile to store the image. So I'll say to do store image or file ID in profile. So we don't have a way to do that yet. Let's go to the schema, and then let's find the profile, which should be up here. I could add an image ID. And I think that's all we need to do. So we will have to rerun a generate and a migrate. So I'll say generate, and I'll say migrate. Okay, so that should add it in. And now we just need to basically update our profile. So we should be able to do, so like let's figure out where we updated the profile name. I think that's here. And that's doing a put. Now to keep this simple, I might actually just like copy this whole file and just say profile image. I'm kind of breaking the RESTful approach to my API at this point, but it's fine. I think RESTful is very too structured and inflexible. So profile image, basically you can do a put request here. This will be an image ID. If it's not defined, we'll throw an error and we'll say it's required. So this is how we can update the profile with the image ID. And of course, on the front end, we could just add another method for updating that. I'll just pass an image ID here. We'll do a put request, the profile image. Everything else should be basically the same as it was for the other method. And then what we need to do is go back and just like call that method. Okay, so that should update our profile to use the new image ID, and then we can come full circle to then just revalidate our profile by revalidating the query client, which I think we're going to have to import. So let's just go ahead and bring that in like that. And then this, where we do image set image, like honestly, we don't even need anymore. We can instead just say profile dot image ID. Now we're going to have to know where this URL is because it needs to point to our S3 bucket. So we could probably make a utility function up here called get image URL, and that needs to take the public bucket name, which I think we need to do Expo public storage bucket name like this. And then we can just append the image ID to it. So we're going to go ahead and just set this equal to here. And then here in the .env, we will just do HTTP localhost 9000 get social so that we know where to store it. Go ahead and add it to my example too. And then we can use the get image URL over here. And technically this could be used like in different places too. Like we might have to use this other places. So I might move it out to utility. Let's go and move this to utils. I'll say images. And I'll just export it here. So we have a centralized place we can use this. And then I'm going to import it from this file. All right, so if everything works good now, I should be able to go back. I'm going to change my profile picture. That should hopefully update my user to now have that image ID. And I'm going to check my database because it's not showing up. Let's go to profiles. And there is an image ID here, 85C. So this did get stored. And if I look at the S3 bucket that's in that folder, 85C, so that image got stored there. So I think there's just an issue with like the styling maybe. I'm going to go ahead and just console log what this image URL is because right now it's not getting displayed. It says undefined. So I think I probably just need to hard restart my server so it can find those environment variables we just defined. Try it again. Okay, and now it seems like it's loading. So let's try to change it to a different waterfall and see if that loads. Awesome. Okay, that's loading. Now to really show you that this is working, in case you don't believe me, we can now go back to our feed page. So let's go to like the dashboard index. And where we're displaying the avatar, which I think was here, the avatar placeholder, we're instead going to display the image based on the profile. So I think we have to say post profile display name. So let's just import this image from React Native. We're going to get rid of the avatar placeholder. And then we'll go to avatar image over here. Right now, I think this is coming back from the backend, but like I don't think we added it to the response, so we should probably do that. Let's try to log in and see. Okay, so it's still not loading. I think we have to go to the API that's used for the posts, and then here we have to say like image ID of true. Let's just try to refresh this again and see. There it is. The image is showing up now. Okay, so now I could like log out and log back in as a different user. And then go to his settings. We're going to change his to a waterfall. Click choose. And then we're going to go back and that should Well, it's not going to update. I think we're going to have to like force it to update the feed or something. It would be kind of nice if we could just like pull this down and have it refresh. I think there's a way to do that. Yeah, so let's just go here. I'm going to go dashboard index. And I'm going to add a method called handle refresh. And we're going to bring in the query client again. And all we want to do is just refresh the posts. And the way we can do this is just on this body scroll view, you can just paste in this handle refresh controller and it'll just like automatically refresh for you. It's pretty cool. So like, I think we just need to go here and say is refetching. So I think now I can just drag this down and like you see that little loading icon, it just refreshes for us. So like if I were to go back, change this to a different type of waterfall, and then go back here and just pull it down. Oh, I'm logged in as regulatory knight. Let's try making him be the yellow one. Okay, so now it's yellow, and if I refresh it, it turns yellow. Okay, so that's again another way that you can like add a force refresh to a page. I think it might be better user experience to just reforce the feed, and also maybe the profile, because I think if I were to click on this profile, we haven't displayed the image here, so like we're gonna have to add that as well. So let's go to the profile page, and we are going to do something similar with the image. So let's grab this image. Let's find the avatar. I'm going to paste this in. We're going to go ahead and get image URL. We should be able to get the profile now, which I think it's up here. So we'll say profile image ID or nothing. And then again, the avatar image. I think we could just add one in here. Let's click on myself and now the image shows up. So again, what I was trying to do is like, if you do change your image, so if you go to the count settings, and we should probably invalidate a couple of other things. So like we should probably invalidate the feed. We should probably invalidate your own profile, which I think would be like the profile ID here. Let me just double check. So this is profile of user ID, and then we would say profile. Yeah, this would have to be profile of user ID. Okay, kind of a hacky approach. I don't really truly like this, but it will work. So now if I go here and change this to, I don't know, the waterfall again, that should update on every single page. So it updates on my profile and it should update on my feed as well. Although it didn't. Why did it not? Although it didn't because it's called posts, not feed. Let's try this one more time. Do the flowers, and now it's updated. Okay, so that was a lot of stuff we just added in, and we should probably git ignore that S3 folder. So like let's do a git ignore, and then let's find S3 git social star. Those don't show up in our git commit. Yeah, tons of stuff to get the S3 stuff working, and getting this deployed out will be probably really difficult. I'm not sure how far I'll take that. But let's just go ahead and commit getting S3 image uploading working. Now let's just do some finishing touches. So for example, the notifications page, it just doesn't look too good. I'm gonna go ahead and just try to let AI fix this up and make it look a little nicer. I'm gonna say, can you improve the notifications modal to make it look nicer than it already is? Try to use a color theme that matches the auth, index. I'm just going to see what this can do. Let's just accept this and see what it looks like. Okay, so this looks a little bit better already. I'm not sure why the AI did the wrapper there. I don't think the wrapper is even needed. So let's remove that. But yeah, this looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and, all right, and that's how it kind of looks like if you have more notifications, which I'm pretty happy with. I think it looks pretty good. Now the final steps are we want to get this application actually deployed somewhere, right? It's always cool when your application is in production. So how exactly would you do that? Well, it turns out there's something called EAS Hosting that's built into Expo, which allows you to deploy both your application to the App Store very easily and seamlessly, And then additionally, you can deploy out your APIs. Remember, we have all these APIs. Those have to run somewhere, right? And so you can try to figure out how to deploy it yourself, or you can just deploy them with the EAS hosting. So if you want to try to deploy out the application, you can go ahead and install this EAS CLI. So let's just run this down here. And now that you have that command line tool installed, you can do an EAS login. So let's run that. It says we are already logged in as web dev Cody. So if you already went to Expo and made an account, you should be able to just log in with that. So let's just do webdevcody@gmail.com. Go ahead and enter a password, and then they'll walk you through some steps. If you want to set it up to server mode to use server functions and your API routes, you have to go to your app JSON. And I do believe we already set ours to output server. So you just have to make sure you go here and set this output server. And then you can do npx expo export platform web. I think you can also use iOS or Android. I think if you use Android and iOS, you have to already have like an account set up with the App Store, and you might have to pay that $99 on iOS App Store to be able to deploy stuff there. But at the very least, we could try to deploy to the web. I think that should work for our needs. Let's just go ahead and run this. I think there's a lot more that we'd have to actually like refactor to get this fully working on the web. For example, we're using secure storage, and also we'd have to set up like a real S3 bucket, and then we have to set up a user role with IAM permissions so that we can connect to the bucket. But let's just go ahead and kind of show the process. So I did that export of the platform web, and that basically gets everything built and ready to be deployed out. Now, before you deploy, you may have to create a project in your Expo dashboard. So I went ahead and created one called Get Social. And then after you've done that, you can go to your project, and there is an ID that you can use. You want to link your local project to that remote project ID. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that command. If I can actually go back to my terminal there. Now I'm going to run this. It's saying it's already linked to a different account. I'm going to say yes, because I think when I cloned this project, it was linked to the wrong repo. But now I should be able to do a deploy, and that should deploy my web build to getsocial.expo.app. Let's just try to run this and see what happens. All right, and now we have an actual live URL that we can look at to use our application. I think it might crash when I open it up. Let's just go ahead and look at it and see. There's our app. Let's get social. Now, like I mentioned, I think we're using a secure storage library, so like this stuff will not work on the web. I think we could probably just modify the code real quick if we wanted to fix that. So let me go to the storage class, and I could actually add some type of ternary to check if we're currently on iOS or if we're just on web. And so for secure safe, I could actually just say if we are web, then we are going to do local storage. Otherwise, we're going to do the secure storage. So I could just say local storage set item. And then we'll do the same thing for the other ones. So if we're web, we can just get that item. And then finally, if we are web, we'll just remove the item from local storage. Hopefully this will work fine. And I think we should just be able to basically rebuild. So I'll rerun that Expo export platform, and that should rebuild my code. And then I should just be able to deploy it real quick. So EAS deploy, that should resubmit my code and get it deployed out. And hopefully that error goes away. Okay, let's go back to our deployed application. And there you have it. We have a fully deployed Expo app for the web platform. I will say there's other things we have to get set up. Like for example, I have to set up like a real database, and I have to set up environment variables to point to it. I'd have to set up a production S3 bucket, set up a user and then IAM permissions and keys and put on my environment. There's a lot more stuff I have to do to get this in production, like officially. But just wanted to demo that there is a really easy way to get your Expo apps deployed out if you do decide to deploy it to the web and you have it like mobile responsive for the web. And once you deployed your application, you can go to this Expo dashboard and go to your project, and you'll see all the different deployments I have done here. And if you click on the last one, you can go through here and see your metrics in your requests, what path names and URLs that you're basically requesting the most on your Expo app. You can view your logs, which I don't have any logs printed out just at this time. You can view your requests and some metrics. It's a really nice dashboard. It just really gives you insight into how your Expo app is currently being used. If you want to configure your environment variables, you can go down here. There's an environment variables section. And then I could add in all my custom environment variables. So for example, my database URL, if I actually got a real database here, I could point it to Postgres, et cetera, et cetera. And I could add like my S3 bucket. and then also like my AWS secret access keys, etc. And so once you've added those, when you do a deployment, it should take those keys and use them. It's pretty cool that I can actually upload directly from my .env file. So if I have like a .env.prod, I could just go ahead and just upload that, and then that'll auto-populate. Anyway, I had a lot of fun building out my first mobile application using Expo. It was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Honestly, I was very intimidated building and learning how to, build native applications, but Expo made that super easy. And then the fact that you can deploy all your stuff using the EAS CLI tool and also deploy your stuff to a hosted environment, I'm actually super impressed. And don't be surprised if I start making more Expo related content on my channel. This was a sponsored video, but I kind of just like this. I want to be able to build mobile applications that I can use as I walk around the house or something. And I think this really just opens up that pathway to make it super easy for me. So stay tuned. If I make more videos on Expo, don't be surprised. Really, really great toolkit and a really cool deployment service, EAS. Go check it out. And thank you for sponsoring my video. Stay tuned for the next ones. Have a good day and happy coding.